Good evening, everyone, wherever you might be watching around the country or indeed the world. It's round 7 of the Apex Rear Wing DRM Championship, and Goofball Antics heads into the back end of this championship with a 16-point advantage over Sam Smith. Tonight promises to be a totally unpredictable challenge, as it is a circuit that no one has raced on before, apart of course from its builder Roadhog, a man who penned such circuits as Halls Gap Raceway and Place City Circuit that we've raced in the past. And he's gone and done it again, producing Hollowham Raceway for what is becoming a signature event on the calendar, the Roadhog Round. My absolute pleasure once again to welcome Matt Dunlop into the box alongside myself, Stairs, bringing you all the action tonight. Good evening, Matty.
Good evening, Stairs, and good evening to everyone watching on as well. Great to have your company once again, and welcome to Hollowham Raceway, set somewhere in some indiscriminate location in Australia. It is one of the most undulating circuits we've raced on so far this season, Stairs.
It most certainly is. It puts Tailem Bend to shame. Very undulating indeed, and natural contours, at least they look like natural contours, as it is completely fictional. That is certainly up to interpretation. Let's have a quick look at the points. I mentioned earlier on in the broadcast that Goofball Antics held a lead over Sam Smith, and that is how it looks. The top 10. Birdo not here tonight, and is going to be very hurtful for his chances of jumping up towards the top end of the championship points, and he will be under threat, no doubt, from the likes of Xeris, Madbird, and Foley. Resist also getting his first podium last time out. He's looking to improve on where he sits currently down there in 7th place. Ahead of Roadhog, Nether and Pablo tied on 42 points apiece to round out the top 10.
So it is still Goofball Antics who leads by a margin of 16 points, as you mentioned earlier, of course. And that's quite a margin to be having at this point of the season, especially with the car that he's in, the BMW 320, over that Porsche 935. That's a little bit over half a race win's worth. So that's a substantial margin, as I was saying. And it's important to note that this track here wasn't raced on by anyone yet, apart from some offline experience that we've had a little bit, as well as Roadhog himself, who built the track. So this is going to be a real open market. Anyone could win here. And as we look at practice, Resist is currently leading the way. So we know he was a fast driver. He's got his first podium so far this season at Watkins Glen. And at the moment, he's on the pace here, Stairs, isn't he?
He is, but he's just been surpassed in the top of the standings by his brother Xeris, who's just gone a full second faster than Resist. So Xeris has always shown to be very, very strong on circuits that are new to everyone. He's a very quick, adaptable driver, and he's proven that right now with, I'm assuming, what was a quali practice, because that time came out of absolutely nowhere.
Yeah, definitely. A margin of 1.1 seconds to his brother Resist there, in a BMW 320, no less. So this could prove to be a very strong track for those guys, both Xeris and Goofball Antics, of course, our championship leader, who's currently sitting in 3rd in the standings, albeit a fair margin back from first, 1.6 seconds so far in this practice session. But yeah, we were having a chat earlier in the... Sorry, go ahead, Seth.
I was going to say, don't count him out completely, because although he is sitting over, over 30 points adrift of championship leader Goofball Antics, any retirements for Goofball Antics and Sam Smith and Xeris taking the win could mean that he would put himself in contention towards the back end of this championship.
That's exactly right. And retirements aren't going to be such a talking point at this track, I think. There's plenty of runoff, which is really one of these tracks where grass everywhere, plenty of distance to the concrete walls. So you're not in a huge amount of danger of hitting them, even if you do go off at a rate of knots, because there's literally grass everywhere to catch you as you go off. So hopefully we see a full field of 13 finishes by the end of this, of course, with 2 of our regulars not appearing today.
So, at the moment, it's Xeris, Resist, Goofball Antics, and Sam Smith occupying the top 4 spots, all within about 1.6 seconds of one another. And then it's a big gap down to Brenton Foley, who's leading the battle for best of the rest currently down there, about 3.7 seconds adrift of the time that was managed by Xeris a few short moments ago. Bit of a gaggle there behind with Madbird, Roadhog, and Decimage all within about a second or so of one another. And then we've got Nether, Pablo, Tyrrell, and Rody back of the timesheet. So they'll be starting their lap times early on in the shootout.
You can definitely expect some of those times to be shaking up, though, because, of course, with the relative lack of experience around here, some people might be able to produce an incredible lap during qualifying that we hadn't seen the likes of in this practice session. And at the same time, some of these people might be sandbagging as well, trying to hide their true pace. And it's going to be very interesting to see. And of course, one thing to keep in mind about this track is you will have noticed on some of our camera angles going around that there is little to zero paved runoff on the edges of this track. It seems to be grass all the way around, save for a little bit of gravel on a few of those corners. So if you go off, you're going to be shooting off for quite a while, losing a bit of time. And as one thing I did notice when I was running practice laps of my own is that track cuts, as a result, can be relatively infrequent. You might be skimming over that curb a little bit more than you normally would, trying to push the boundaries of the track limits a little bit more, and your lap time is gone. So if you get one track cut in qualifying, your lap time is over and you start from the back of the grid, or near enough to the back of the grid stairs.
It has been quite an issue in shootouts that we've had in previous rounds. We saw quite a few in Montreal and Watkins Glen, and they had to start from the back because of those track cuts. So less of an issue here because, as you mentioned, that extra runoff area. But one consequence of that is that a lot of the racetrack looks very same. No matter where you are on the circuit, you've got acres and acres of grass either side, and the trees are a long way from the circuit, so they don't provide you with a very good reference point for braking zones. And we've seen and heard drivers complaining throughout the practice session whenever someone knocks out a brake marker board that was their only reference for that corner. So watch out for that towards the back end of this race. No doubt some of those brake marker boards will go missing, and that could potentially cause some people to go off.
That's exactly right. There's no real furniture around this track, no real landmarks, if you will, except for the land itself. The main thing the drivers will have to keep an eye on is how the undulations go up and down, and use that as a reference point for where they are on the track. With a bit of practice, it does take time, but of course the brake markers are just the foam boards that stick up in the grass. So if someone goes off and cleans one up, it's gone for the whole session. So that's not going to be of any use to anybody. And a lot of those guys they're all in the same voice chat together, so they'll probably be making sure that no one steers anywhere close to those brake marker boards. And they'll also be warning each other about lap traffic, because this is going to be a very difficult track to be getting around lap traffic cars. So they'll want to be keeping very close communication with each other to make sure there's no unfortunate incidents.
Absolutely. Just 15 seconds remaining in this practice session, and only three cars I should say, left on the racetrack at the moment. Just Resist. In fact, Sam Smith has just exited out to the pits, and Rody left on the circuit as we tick down to 0. So the order is set, unless Resist can improve on this lap, and that will determine the grid order, or not the grid order, but the running order for the shootout, which will start with Rody and finish with Xerus, unless Resist can finish this lap and jump up ahead of Xerus. But one would think that's a little bit unlikely, considering he's 1.4 seconds off as it stands.
He's doing personal best times as he goes around the circuit so far, so it's good to see Resist improving his own personal times, and it'll be great to see how he's able to do that as he goes up. But he has abandoned his lap now, gone into the pits, and that will be the end of the practice session. So Xerus will be starting this shootout from the final slot, looking to make that first position up, and the first car out on track will be Rody in the Blair Witch Rensport Ford Capri.
That he is, and he will give us our first look at this racetrack from an onboard perspective when he goes out onto the circuit in a few short moments. And we'll try and jump on board with him if we can find his car. There it is, making its way to the end of the pit lane.
Quite a long pit lane, isn't it, Stairs?
It is very, very long. It's certainly got the capacity for a lot more cars than we've seen here tonight.
Yeah, and the speed limit is going to be 80 kilometers an hour during qualifying and race sessions. Obviously, the pit lane speed in qualifying is not super important, as Rody parks up on the end of the pit lane waiting for the green light to go. But during a race, that's going to make strategy very, very interesting. The amount of time you have to spend in the pit lane. Maybe the difference between some guys wanting to make a second stop. I'm not sure how likely that is, but word around the group chat was that the BMW 320s are going to have no chance of doing a single stint race. They will have to make at least one pit stop this race as Rody now exits the pits to start his outlap.
Well, that does give the BMW 320s, or sorry, the Porsche 935 turbos.
Oh, he's already rotated it.
Yeah, that's not good at all.
It's a tricky part of the track, that first section, that chicane there, because you've got that second curb where you've got practically zero grip. You have to get your line planted and straight line that second corner before you go over the crest, because as you go over, of course, your wheels almost lose contact with the ground. And if you hit that curb hard enough, your two right wheels will come quite off the ground and your car will be sitting at 45 degrees like Marc Marquez. So you have to make sure you can keep that thing planted and floor it all the way through without losing too much traction. And if not, the consequences can follow on through the next 50 or 100 meters or so, and you can end up spinning up the track like Roddy did as before. He's keeping it on the track so far, trying to get as much temperature into these tyres as you can to get the fastest lap possible. Now, this is another one of those tricky chicanes. As you jump on the brakes, you've got to be careful to get your weight shift right, because it's a short, sharp kink to the right, followed by a long, sweeping left-hand bend with varying radii. It's quite tight in the early stage before it opens out quite a bit, and then gets very tight, and you have to suddenly jump on the brakes and straighten the car up as much as you can for this right-hand turn here. Not too dangerous, that one there. It's pretty easy to keep all four wheels on the ground there through another right-hand sweeper now. And there's a lot of these sort of corners on the track. You'll see quite a few of these bends double up in their characteristics. Here's another one of those right-hand kink into a long sweeping left bends, one of those hook sections that we saw earlier, and he's gone off the grass a little bit there, and that scrubbed off a lot of time, but he's nowhere near the start line yet, so he should be pretty safe. There's one of those brake markers we talked about as he jumps on the brakes now into a almost 90-degree left-hander now with a big run down. This is the fastest point of the track here. Trying to keep your right line as it's sort of a blind crest going into this corner. Back down to second gear or third gear, probably more preferable for this corner here. Long sweeping right-hander, want to touch those outside and inside apexes as much as you can as you charge down towards what is the final bend of this track, which reminds me a lot of the Lorenzo bend at the Jerez circuit, which is, of course, the final corner of that track as well. You've got the pit lane curving up the inside there, which might be a bit tricky for someone to charge into at full pelt. Then you pull back out onto the main straight, get as much traction down as you can for a good run into turn one. And Rody is coming across the grids now, and he's about to cross the start-finish line now. And he will start his flying lap around Hollowham Raceway.
Fantastic description of the racetrack there, and it seems as though it was designed specifically to be as difficult as they possibly could be for these cars. Pretty much every corner has a blind crest over the apex, which means that your car's going light more or less at the part where you don't want it to when you've wound on the lock and you're trying to make the corner. So that caught out Rody in the early stages of his outlap. He had a fairly clean end to his outlap, but let's see what he can do on his flyer.
Another thing to note is that almost 0% of this circuit is completely straight. There are no real defined straights here. It's usually just very, very, very wide corners that masquerade as straights. So it can be quite hard to judge the turn-in points for some of these corners, especially when those brake markers go missing. This is one of those right-lefters that I was talking about. He takes it a little bit slowly but safely, which I think is the strategy for this qualifying session.
Yeah, that characteristic that you mention of, pretty much no part of the circuit being straight, that's a little bit of a trademark of Roadhog's racetracks. Even the street circuits didn't seem to have too many straight bits. I remember one corner at Hall's Gap that was just this long, flat-out left-hander, but it was just ever so slightly cambered, so if you missed getting your car in that groove just a little bit, it spit you out, should I say. There are a couple of corners on this racetrack that remind me of Hall's Gap in that regard.
Yeah, not a huge amount of camber around this track either. It's all relatively flat, so there's not much in the way of unpredictable camber around this circuit. But those long sweeping corners are going to be putting a lot of load on the tyres of whatever side of the car is being loaded up through there. So tyre wear is going to be a big thing here.
Oh, absolutely. And that is probably going to be a factor later on in the race because there is such a long distance between the racetrack and the walls. We're not expecting to see safety cars in this race. And so that means that these guys will be flat out for the full 55 minutes we expect. And so those tyres will suffer ever more. Rody coming to the line now to set the benchmark time for this qualifying session, which is a 2:17 flat. So he's had a fairly clean lap, so good work to him for that, as Pablo goes across the start-finish line to start his lap now.
Yeah, that was a personal best lap from Roadie by a margin of about 3 seconds. So it's great to see a lot of improvement from him as well. And hopefully he can keep that improvement up as he progresses through the race and keeps learning this track. Pablo now takes to the track through that second corner there where he got a little bit of air. You'll always see the cars lift off the ground just a little bit through that turn two. Depending on how hard and fast they hit that curve, of course, that air can prove to be a lot more. Now, a few of these corners, the drivers have to be very wary of, especially if they haven't toyed with their setups too much. There's not a huge amount of variance in brake bias you can give to these cars, particularly the Ford Capris. And if you jump hard on the anchors at some of these hard braking zones, such as the last corner, turn one as well, you can often oversteer just on deceleration and spin out. So you have to be very careful to keep your car in a straight line there. But Pablo's looking pretty good. He's up 2 seconds so far at the first sector, so great margin so far from Pablo in the Ford Capri.
Yeah, that's a sizable margin. It's been a very clean start to the lap for Pablo, and he's been very, very patient. Smooth is fast, as they say, and that is proving to be the case as he goes around this long left-hander. I think that was the one that reminded me of the corner back in Hall's Gap that I was mentioning a few moments ago. It's a very long circuit, 5.6 kilometers, one of the longest circuits that we'll visit, if not the longest, in this DRM championship. Quite different to a lot of the other circuits, Barbagallo being one of the shortest ones that we went to, and also Montreal being significantly shorter lap than this one as he goes through the second sector split, finding another 3 or 4 tenths of a second to be up by 2.3.
And it's certainly not a simple circuit either. So being a long track is one thing, but having a ton of corners with all sorts of different characteristics is quite another. It really makes it a tough learning exercise for these drivers to get the feel for this circuit and be able to milk as much time out of it as they possibly can. Pablo's coming down into the final corner now, and this is that braking zone. Watch the back end, see if he can keep it in line. He gets a little bit wobbly, misses the apex a little bit there. Not as smooth as he would have liked. Tries to go all the way to the curb, but not too much, because those curbs are quite slippery, especially when they're trying to floor all these horsepowers through them, courtesy of the back tyres. Crosses the line now. It's a 2-minute 13.842. He's up by almost 2 seconds. A great lap from Pablo.
Yeah, although he was deep into the final corner as Tyrrell is on his outlap, faster than Roadie, who braked a little bit early, I think, for the final corner, just being a little bit cautious. And that was probably where a lot of the time in the final sector was lost for Roadie and gained for Pablo. Let's see what Tyrrell can manage.
Another thing I've noticed about this circuit is there's no rubbering on the racing line, because that's always been a really good indicator for me in racing games as to where I should be placing my car in the corners, is how much rubber is sitting on the racing line in the braking zones and the hard turning zones. But there's none of that around here. It's looking as if it was freshly resurfaced. So that's going to be another challenge for the drivers to overcome as well. But by the looks of it, everyone seems to have learned the track surface pretty well, and the layout as well, Stairs.
Yeah, fairly consistent racing lines we're seeing. A lot of what I like to call rob Peter to pay Paul corners, and this is one example, a left followed by a right, where if that was just a left in isolation, you would run the car all the way out to the right-hand side of the circuit on the exit, but you can't do that when you've got a right-hander following it immediately, because you've got to square the car up to get a good exit out of that right-hander, and so you rob Peter a little bit on the entry and pay Paul on the exit.
That's exactly right. It's one of the most crucial tools a driver can have in learning a new circuit, especially in some of those complexes. And the most ideal way to set the car up so he or she can go as fast as possible through that whole complex, because it's all about how much speed you can carry out. Sometimes you got to sacrifice that first corner, like you said. You got to rob Peter with a really early apex, just so you can get that late apex on a tight following corner and plant your foot down early to get your car onto the straight and narrow as much as you can. Tyrrell is currently running the track. He's got a margin of about he's got quite a good sector actually. He's 46.6, so not as fast as Pablo was. He's sitting somewhere in the middle, so it's a 2.29 second deficit now through the second sector. So as it stands, he's going to be sitting provisionally second in between the two Ford Capris that have come before him.
Yeah, pretty close though. Roadie wasn't too different to that, so I think if Tyrrell can nail the last corner, he should be in second, as you say. But to the second sector split, there wasn't a lot to choose between them. Let's see how he manages the final corner. A lot cleaner than what he managed on his outlap, and gets a nice late apex, which is difficult to do with the wall on the inside. You've got to judge that to perfection. But I reckon he'll be about a second clear of Roadie, given what we saw with Pablo. And yeah, not too far away, but 1.4 seconds. So Tyrrell slots into second as D. Samaj starts his lap.
Yeah, you really do have to be careful with that final bend because it looks a little bit like La Source in that it's a very tight hairpin with a wall on the inside, which makes it effectively blind. But the difference between that corner and La Source is that La Source is an even radius corner, so you know how it's going to behave on entry, and you've got a ton of runoff on the
Oh
exit
no,
as well.
Decimage is
Speaking of
off.
runoff, Decimage has done exactly that.
Oh no.
And he's gone off, and I'd say he's thrown his lap away. That's a big shame for Decimage. He's been one of the fastest competitors we've seen so far. Hasn't been able to string together a good result yet, unfortunately. And today, unfortunately, at the moment, doesn't look like it's going to be the day. But anything can happen in the race. Qualifying isn't super crucial, as anyone who watched the German Grand Prix would have noticed.
Absolutely. I don't know if he got a track cut from that. I can't imagine that he would have, but he's thrown it out completely. He didn't even decide to finish the lap to register a time, which I find to be a bit curious because if someone has a bigger off than that, then he would have still been ahead of them. So just a little bit impatient maybe from Decimage. He maybe didn't practice much for this race and threw it away in qualifying. And that was our first major mistake that we've seen in this qualifying session. So he will be starting from the back. We turn our attention now to the outlap of the man who built this circuit. So he gets a bit more airtime in this qualifying session, our track architect.
Well, I've been watching him for the past few seconds as he's been going through the past 3 or 4 corners, and he's really been testing the limits of the road here. He's been dipping wheels into the grass, look at him now, he's getting as much heat into these tyres as he possibly can, and at one point, he got a couple of wheels into the grass as he was trying to put a lot of power through those right-hand side wheels, almost rotated the thing, managed to keep it on track. So he knows how to control this car, and especially around this track, this could be one of the shocks of this qualifying session.
Well, he was down the timesheets a little bit in practice, but he might have been saving something special for this qualifying session. Roadhog coming up to the final corner now, and that characteristic wide entry to give you a late apex, although he lights up the rears a little bit as he's trying to get the power down in this. Nibbles Raya had a Celica, the only Celica in the field. Roadhog starts his lap now, going up to the first corner, throws the anchors on, leaving a little bit of racetrack on the outside, and carrying the speed through turn 1, cutting across into the pit exit, but not too much. Coming up to the bit where Decimage had his mistake, and got to be so careful on those curbs. They can tip you upside down very, very quickly indeed. And we saw that one lap ago when Decimage did that.
You really do. It's almost more beneficial to try and avoid that inside curb, I'd say. It is nice and fun to smack into those curbs when you can, but if it's putting your wheels up in the air, that's not just stability you're losing, but also traction. You're not getting any speed down into, that's a big slide from Roadhog as he exits one of those tight right-hand corners there. But he's up 0.7 of a second. He's up 3/4 of a second so far. So that's a great margin so far from Roadhog. But you do have to be careful, as I was saying, with getting wheels up in the air because, of course, you can lose precious tenths or hundredths of a second. And this is the part of the track I was telling you about earlier where he was testing the limits of the road surface there. He's kept it all together so far. Nice line through that tight right-hander on the exit of that long sweeping Halls Gap style corner. So looking very neat and tidy so far for Roadhog. Not sure how far he is away from the first sector split yet. I don't think he's too far away.
He's gone through. It was 7/10 up through the first sector split.
Sorry, the second sector split. I think he's coming up to it now. As he exits this corner, he's going to cross the split now. 2.3 seconds up. Great margin from Roadhog.
Amazing. Well, he's been absolutely on the limited grip. It reminds me of a plane coming into land with a crosswind, the way he's been driving the cars, just wiggling back and forth as he's making those little corrections under brakes and under acceleration. And it's proving to be a bold strategy that is paying off for him as the timing is very favourable for him.
Almost reminiscent of that video that a few of you may have seen of Ayrton Senna qualifying his Lotus around Adelaide all those years ago, dancing his car around, trying to find grip where he didn't really need it on the straight sections as well. A true spectacle to watch. And speaking of spectacles, this has been a phenomenal lap from Roadhog. He crosses the line. It's a 2-minute 9.46 with a margin of 4.38 seconds. What a benchmark that is.
Yeah, that was big. He gained a lot of that time in the final sector. He was already up by a fair old margin. 4.3 seconds, that is a statement from Roadhog, so well done to him. Nether starts his lap in the Porsche 935 Turbo, and he's been a bit outspoken in recent seasons against the Roadhog circuits. He hasn't exactly gelled with them. He's gone off at turn 1, but he's contesting this qualifying session, so he must have found something that he liked about it in order to continue.
If he gets this car all the way around and crosses the line to finish his lap, he will be the first of the Porsche 935s to set a time, of course, with Diesamaj having forfeited his attempt. But Nether is, not a big fan of the Roadhog tracks, and not sure how he feels about this one yet. He may have grown to like it, as you said, a little bit. We'll have to wait and see by that first sector split, which will be coming up after this right-hand bend. So, as he comes across now, his time is 40... where is it? There it is. 46.39, so 1.6 seconds down in a Porsche 935. I don't think this track is going to play to the strengths of the Porsche 935 very much, because while it does have a few long sections, it's a very tight and twisty track, and there's no real straight sections for a car to be able to plant itself and drive straight ahead without consideration to the car's weight, because this is one of the heaviest cars on the grid, the Porsche 935, and it's a lot of weight to be dragging around those long corners. Inertia is very important, and I think this is going to be a track for the BMW 320 set.
I agree with you there. I think if anything, the Porsche will pull back a little bit of time in the final sector. The longest straight on this circuit is in the back end of the lap, so you're right, he's losing time throughout this very tricky opening couple of sectors of the lap, and that is playing out here during this qualifying lap. So we'll be hoping that the Porsche 935's advantage will gain him back a little bit of time. He's still on target to slot in behind Roadhog into second provisionally, but of course that's still with a number of runners still left to go in this qualifying session.
Bit of a moment on that curb, on the exit of that right-hander there, that fast right-hander before the hairpin. Kept it together, but big wobble, would have lost a little bit more time, but he's still neat and tiny through that final corner. Nice little corner. He's going to cross the line now. It's not going to be a great time, but it's going to be a time nonetheless. Nether posted a 2-minute 13.63. That's 4.1 seconds off Roadhog's staggering time, and that puts Nether in provisional second, with Madbird now starting his flying lap, barely missing the back of Nether there as he finished his flying lap. So Madbird goes through turn 2 now. Doesn't get too much air off the curbs. Nice start. So the Ford Capris have been pretty racy around here so far. They didn't look too good in practice, mind you. So it could just be the limitations of these cars in how they behave around this track.
Just going to say, I thought Nether would pull back a couple of tenths on Roadhog in that final sector, but it didn't come to bear. He actually only ended up a couple of tenths clear of Pablo, so that Ford Capri doing okay in that final sector with the reasonably long power stretches. Madbird, as you said, nearly hitting the back of Nether. Nether did a good job in the end of getting off the racetrack and exiting out. I can imagine he would have been fumbling around for it. Madbird didn't give a huge margin to Nether ahead of him in that qualifying lap.
I think I've just realised why the reason is, because as you can see now, on a few of these camera angles, you can hear Brenton Foley going past now. He's very close to the back of Madbird, nowhere near as close as you expect these cars to be, and it's because of the nature of the exit of pit lane. The final corner, turn 1, is a much shorter run through the pit lane off-ramp than it is on the track. So if you've got two cars leaving at around the same distance as they go towards that turn 1, the guy in pit lane is going to be on par, if not a little bit faster than you on the exit of that. So he's up already. Madbird is up by 0.03 of a second through the second sector. Not sure if he's going to be able to maintain that through the third sector, but Roadhog, no, he's had a track cut and he's thrown his lap away.
No, well, that was shaping up to be an absolutely ding-dong showdown between Roadhog and Madbird, but, I mean, we said that track cuts might not be too much of an issue here, but it has proven to be the case yet again. I don't remember the last time that we had a round without someone getting a track cut in qualifying, so what looked like was shaping up to be a promising qualifying for Madbird has turned out not to be the case.
So we've got our first track cut for this qualifying session, and hopefully our last one as well. We want to see as many of these guys as possible get laps on the board so we can get a great qualifying session.
That's why Diesamaj should have continued on his lap, because he would have registered a time, assuming he didn't get a track cut, and that would have put him ahead of Madbird.
That's exactly right, and it also would have put him ahead of Bang as well, who is not qualifying for this race and will be starting from the back of the grid. But now, we've got to keep our eyes on Brenton Foley, because he's been nothing short of spectacular every time he gets in this car for qualifying. Wobbling, shaking, sliding all over the place, and still able to string together incredible laps around most of these tracks. And he looks to have gotten to grips with Hollowham Raceway pretty quickly.
He has. That first corner, absolutely rallycross style through there. I mentioned that Roadhog looked like a plane trying to land in a crosswind. This is Foley. He's trying to land in a hurricane. All sorts of sideways, but managing to hang on to his Capri so far, and 6/10 to the good through the first sector. The timing screens love it.
Brilliant
So do
margin
we.
from Brenton Foley there, and he's all over the place, exploring the limits of this grip of this Ford Capri. He really knows how to get the most out of this car, and it's a spectacle to watch as he goes through one of the tight right-handers now into what I think is, he's lighting up the back tyres on the run out of there. I think he may have chosen the wrong gear there and bounced off the rev limiter, so that'll cut into his ideal time just a little bit, but I don't think it's going to hamper him too much. He'll be coming towards the second sector split very soon now as he exits one of the left-hand corners. Unfortunately, we don't have corner references for you. That's 1.6 seconds the margin. Fantastic stuff from Brenton Foley.
That is just spectacular stuff from Brenton Foley, who looks like he's going to take provisional pole with a statement, and by quite a large margin. That may well give the guys who are yet to set their laps something to think about. Might be difficult for them to beat. They have certainly shown that they are worthy to be in that later starting position in the qualifying session, but they will have to prove that they want to start ahead of Brenton Foley when they set their laps, because Foley is laying down a benchmark for them. He's coming up to the line now. It's a 2-minute 7.4 and nearly 2 seconds better than Roadhog. That's fantastic.
Huge margin. So the gap from first to third so far is over 6 seconds, I believe. Yeah, 6.1 seconds from Brenton Foley to Nether so far. Great stuff. But Sam Smith, our second place in the championship man so far, our sole representative in Black Shulpin Rennen, given Berto's absence this week, is going to see what he can do with this Porsche 935. We know he's a quick driver. He's been on the podium for the first 4 races of this season. Didn't appear at Watkins Glen and only finished 5th last time out at Montreal. But let's see what he can do here at Hollowham.
Well, it's so far not quite as spectacular as what Brenton Foley managed, but, well, we saw that Nether struggled a little bit in the opening part of the lap with the Porsche 935 Turbo to get the power down and to wrestle the weight, but Sam Smith has had no such issues. 6.5 tenths of a second up on the time set by Brenton Foley, so proving why he is second in the championship in that Porsche 935 Turbo. He has credited a lot of his success in this championship to his teammate Berto, who is absent this week and is on a fantastic overseas holiday to see some of the fantastic racetracks of the world. Without that, he's doing pretty well, considering how much of the credit he gave Berto.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting the Porsche 935 to be doing fantastic around this circuit. It's a 0.522 through the second sector, so he's lost a smidgen of time through that very bendy second sector, but he's going to be making a lot of that up and then some through the final sector. As mental as anything would say, these splits are getting bigger, or something to that effect, as he goes through that quick right-hander now, charging down towards the Lorenzo corner, as I'm going to be calling it now, as a striking similarity to the Lorenzo Bennett Jerez circuit. But jumps on the brakes, no sign of understeer or oversteer, very neat and tidy. Hasn't even slid it on the exit. He's kept it very cool and calm and collected through that final hairpin. A lot of the guys have been sliding on the entry or the exit of that corner. Hasn't hampered Sam Smith. He's up by 1.9 seconds, and there's that gap I was telling you about. The Porsche really able to stretch those 850 horses in that final sector, and it shows. Great lap from Sam Smith as a 2-minute 5.51 as the championship leader, Goofball Antics, crosses the line to start his flying lap in the BMW 320.
So whenever they inch that benchmark up, they're not inching it up, they're punching it up by feet and yards, as for some reason I use imperial measurements. But Goofball Antics now starting his lap. Bit of a wiggle between turns 1 and 2. Don't think it'll be too costly. We saw that the BMW 320 was very, very good in the medium and slow speed corners in Montreal, and that came to bear with a fantastic qualifying lap from him there. What can he manage here?
Yeah, this track is full of medium and low speed corners and high speed corners as well, but it's going to be really one of the strong tracks for the BMW 320, I think. That's my prediction so far. Don't have any race predictions yet. We'll have to see how the rest of qualifying pans out. But Goofball's down by 5 tenths of a second, so maybe not as strong as I would have thought. It is a little bit of a quicker sector, that first one, as I reckon he's going to be making up a bit of time in Sector 2, although this long sweeper may not produce as quick a micro split as I would have thought. We can't see micro splits or anything like that, of course, and we don't have a live indicator on how his lap time is doing, as the driver may do, depending on what HUD or software he's using. But it's, at the very least, it's neat and tidy, and that's all you can really hope for at a track like this.
And Goofball Antics not running any delta based on the stream that he's had in previous weeks, but he does have various other information such as tyre and brake temperatures, as a lot of them do, and he's matched Sam Smith in the middle sector, still 5/10 adrift. That gap hasn't really gone up or down, but with the final sector we do believe is quite power dependent, and that's not going to help at all. Goofball Antics going very, very wide there, and that's going to cost him dearly. He'll want to keep his foot on the throttle because he'll be under pressure from Bretton Foley at that rate, but it looks like he's thrown pole position away.
That may even constitute a track cut. He is still going, mind you, so we don't know yet, but he did run quite wide very quickly on that corner, and that may constitute a track cut depending on where you are on the circuit. Didn't really have a chance to test it myself. Crosses the line now, provisionally third, so he's behind Brenton Foley by 1.5 seconds. So a lot of time lost to Goofball Antics, who is normally our qualifying specialist. Very uncharacteristic of him, and may just be a result of this track not playing to the strengths of the BMW 320 as much as I would have thought.
Lost a lot of time. Sorry to cut across you there, but that mistake was a lot more costly than I initially guessed or estimated, because it has such a long straight preceding it. So that is the reason why he lost well over a second there, because it was such a crucial corner, and probably why he was pushing so hard to nail it.
That's exactly right. We'll have to wait and see Xeris finishing his lap before we know the true strength of those BMW 320s. But from practice, we know how strong the BMW M1 is, being piloted by Resist, who was leading that practice session for quite some time before his brother leapfrogged him. As he crosses the first split, he's only down 200ths of a second. So that's pretty much on par with Sam Smith at the moment, and this is going to be a great duel between these two.
Yeah, this is fantastic. Resist getting his first podium in Montreal last week, and we think the floodgates might open for him after that, because he's got the confidence now to know that he can do a podium performance, and he looked like he's set to back it up again. He is at a bit of a disadvantage with the heaviness of that BMW M1. It spends a lot more time in the pits than the BMW 320, but just like his brother, I think that he will have taken a lot of confidence from last week's result.
Yeah, he was only managed 7th position in Montreal, unfortunately, so uncharacteristic of the pace we've seen from him. And he is down 4.5 tenths now, so he's lost a little bit of time through the second sector, which I think is down to the fact that this car is, I think, the heaviest on the grid. So it doesn't surprise me there. Watch out for him to make up a lot of that time back in the final sector and be very close to Sam Smith as they cross the line. Neat and tidy through that fast right-hand kink. He did have that podium finish in Watkins Glen, as you mentioned earlier, which was preceded by a 4th place finish in Barbagallo. So we know he's a quick driver, and he's just waiting for the right track to come along to get one of those high podium results. Takes a very late apex through that hairpin. Great line from him. He's crossing the 2-minute mark as he goes into the final straight now. This is going to be a very competitive time, but it's not going to be a 2-minute 5 by any stretch. So it's going to be second position by a second. So 0.928 is the margin. Sam Smith still leads this qualifying session, and now we have his brother Xeris in the BMW 320 starting his flying lap.
Yes, and a good qualifying session for Resist there. Just a chance now to here me is Xeris gets a bit of air coming out of turn 2 and gets a track cut. That's it.
A track cut.
Xeris
He's done.
Starting from the back, he's done. Gracious me.
Unbelievable.
Well, I was trying to use that moment to just correct myself. As you said, it was Watkins Glen, not Montreal, where Resist got his podium. It wasn't last week, it was 2 weeks ago. But Xeris has gone and made a bigger blunder, and that's a bit of a fizzer, really, to end that qualifying session. Sam Smith, as a result, will start from pole position from Resist, and the other championship rivals, Goofball Antics and Xeris, starting a bit further back. Xeris a lot further back.
Yeah, very unusual session there. I had a feeling that was going to happen, though, with the unusual track cuts that you can get at certain points. Wasn't expecting someone like Xeris to hit one, though. He's a very experienced steerer. He's one of the most veteran drivers in ARW and dominated last season in the Caterhams, of course, as those who followed ARW Season 7 will know. He already has a win so far in ARW Season 8, as well as a second place finish. Those results coming at Montreal and Barbagallo, respectively. So he can wrangle a lot of pace out of that BMW 320. but he's going to have to do a lot of that if he's going to get a good result here at Hollowham. He'll be starting from the back of the grid or near enough to it, as we had a handful of guys not posting times there. So the order of which those guys will be starting the race is something I can't confirm until I see the starting grid lining up for the race, but we'll keep you posted when that happens. We've got a practice session now. The clock has just started ticking over. The green flag is out, so 10 minutes more of practice just to get a little bit more warming up time in these cars so they can get a final, some little bits of race training, some qualifying laps are a bit useless now, but maybe they'll be testing running on low or high fuel loads to see how the cars behave around here.
Yeah, it's a good opportunity to practice their pit entries and also practice starts, which they will get a chance to practice as a whole, and they often do take this opportunity to do so. Worst qualifying session of the season for Xeris. His worst prior to that was 5th place in the opening round in Brno. Ever since then, he's been fairly consistent. 4th place in qualifying on 3 different occasions, and 3rd place in Watkins Glen. So he won from 4th place last week. It's going to take a bit of luck to get the win tonight. But having said that, he was last after the first corner in Montreal. So his qualifying really had no bearing on his final result. It was that opening lap skirmish that he got involved in Montreal that he recovered from. But of course, he did have the pace there. Whether he has the pace here, well, we think he does based on the practice times, but race pace is a different beast entirely.
And consistency is the main thing too. Being able to string together fast laps for a whole 55 minutes is going to be crucial at any track, especially here though, as a lot of these guys aren't familiar with it. So another thing that is worth mentioning at this point is those track cuts. They popped up a little bit more than I was expecting in qualifying, and the drivers will have to keep tabs on how many track cuts they're getting, because if you get 4 track cuts, I think it is, you have to take a drive-through penalty. And at this circuit, as we were mentioning earlier, the pit lane is very long, so a drive-through penalty is going to cut massively into your race time.
Exactly right. And they're just lining up now to have their first practice start of this race. It's another pole position for Sam Smith, and he's had a few already in this season. And if I'm not wrong, the most pole positions of anyone apart from his teammate Birdo, who has got quite a few himself. So it's only ever been the Pink Pigs on the pole position, Sam Smith or Birdo, and Sam Smith continues that run tonight. Looking like it might have been under threat tonight from either Resist or Xeris, but not coming to fruition for either of them.
If you're just joining us now, don't stress, you're not missing the start of the race. This is just a practice start, as they all seem to get away relatively well. A bit of a kerfuffle at the back there, and I think they managed to get through it 3 wide. I can't tell from my camera angle. They're all looking pretty good. They're all clear so far, which is good to see, because that start-finish straight is a very narrow piece of tarmac as Xeris rotates into the pit exit there. It's a very narrow piece of tarmac with no runoff on either side. You've got concrete walls touching painted lines on the edges of the tarmac there. So if someone stalls or bogs the grid or bogs their start down, it's going to be very tough to get around them at pace.
That opening few corners reminds me a little bit of Barbagallo as they wind their way up the hill, and very, very narrow with those high curves either side. That is going to be absolutely treacherous on the first lap of the race, especially when they're all side by side. 2 wide action will be very dangerous there, as we see both Tyrrell and Madbird, I think that is, spinning as they come towards the back end of the first sector. So they'll want to be tiptoeing their way through there. It's going to be very, very treacherous indeed. Watch out for spins on the first lap there.
Yeah, speaking of 2 wide action, they did that spin in complete synchronicity, so that was very nice to see. Probably not nice for them to be rotating through the track there, as Decimage suffered a similar fate. A little bit after that, trying to get some grip out of that tight right-hand corner, rotated the car. I think he may have been tapped by someone as well. So they'll be wanting to make sure none of that really happens, because, yeah, spins are going to be a very, very unfortunate happenstance if they do occur in the first lap. As of course they would be unfortunate if they happen at any point through the race, but you don't want to be losing that much time on the start, especially when you've got a gaggle of cars coming behind you threatening to ram you off the track if you park there. So keeping your nose clear is very important, as I always say, and as I also always say, you cannot win the race on the first lap, but you can sure as hell lose it stairs.
Very much the case. The countdown to race start continues. We're just over 5 minutes until the 55-minute race gets underway. So we're going to take this opportunity for a short break, and on the other side, we will continue the countdown. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Hollowham Raceway for round 7 of the Apex Rear Wing DRM Championship. We are less than 3 minutes now from the start of the race. 55 minutes plus 1 lap. Matty, what are you predicting?
I'm not sure what I'm predicting. I want to say resist for the win for this one. I'm going to go out on a limb and say resist because anything can happen given the nature of this track. And as he's seeing in practice at the moment, we've got guys spinning off the track all over the place, and they're all practicing their pit entries as well. But everything about this track is completely alien to them, as we've been saying time and time again before. And Resist seems to be one of the strongest guys to be able to take advantage of that so far. So I'm going to put Resist on the number 1 spot, and I think Sam Smith will fill out the podium there somewhere as well. And I'm going to put Goofball. I'm going to go Resist in first, Sam Smith second, Goofball third. That's my prediction. What about you, Stairs?
Well, that's a bold call. Before qualifying, I would have said Xeris, because I think the confidence that he will have gained from winning last week will put him in that winning habit again. He's done it from the back. We used to have reverse grid races all the time, and he would win those ones, but winning has been a lot harder to come by in this season for him. I still reckon he'll find his way up onto the podium, and BMW, the other BMW 320 of Goofball Antics is likely to be there as well. Sam Smith had a tricky race last week. I wonder if that will continue this week. I reckon Goofball Antics for the win, Sam Smith second, and Xeris third. Okay,
interesting to know. And it's going to be also a fair point to consider is that this track is very narrow the whole way around, and as I said earlier, there's not much runoff, so passing is going to be very difficult. So the positions may not change too much from how they're sitting at the moment as a result of qualifying, but at the very least, it's going to make for some very interesting battles with people trying to get past in places that you least expect. We've got about 40 seconds left before the end of the session now. Not a huge amount of laps have been put in so far due to the long nature of this track, and the practice starts, from what I've gathered, seems to be pretty clean so far. So hopefully it's incident-free on the start of the race proper, which is just under half a minute away.
think we'll see a lot of offs in this race, so although it can be hard to pass if the car ahead doesn't make any mistakes, I think one of the best strategies for making positions during this race will be waiting for the other cars ahead to go off the track and get a free pass as a result.
Speaking of offs, Resist has done exactly that. He's gone off the track at some point. Not sure if it was deliberately or not. I'm just trying to go through replay footage and find. But he was missing his wheel and he speared off into the garage. Nope, he just launched across the apex or something to do.
So bit of fun there.
No harm done there.
Apart from the metaphorical, or not metaphorical, or the virtual harm done to his car, not 40 seconds from the start of this race. But yes, point taken. Just a bit of fun.
I'm sure they'll have that fixed up in an instant.
Well, that silence that you can hear, or not hear, as the case may be, means that we have reached 0 on a countdown to race start. The warm-up is over, and the gridding process will start now.
So we've still only got 12 cars in the garages at the moment. No sign of Bang as of yet. We didn't see him in practice either, so this may only be a 12-car race with Bang absent in the main force racing car, which normally competes in the same garage as Pablo, but no sign of him yet so far. So it's looking to be, yes, just 12 cars. So
and no staggering. Another thing that we're noticing from this camera angle is that it's not a staggered grid. The front row, if you get the better launch, for instance in Resist's case, and he's able to get ahead before turn 1, he may well be able to, well, he'll either take the outside, which will become the inside, or he'll be clear completely if he gets a good start.
And that puts the pressure on Sam Smith to get a good launch as well, because he has to keep himself alongside Resist to be able to get the right into turn 1. They're all gridded up now, and we'll be starting the formation lap very soon. So that's going to be something crucial to look out for. Both of those guys at the front will need to get fantastic starts as they pull away for their formation lap now. Let's run through the starting grid for round 7 of ARW Season 8 here at Hollowham Raceway. Starting from pole position will be Sam Smith in the black Schuppenrennen Pink Pig Porsche. Next to him will be Resist, looking to capitalise on his fantastic form at Watkins Glen with his first podium, trying to improve on that result here, starting from 2nd position. Great result from him in qualifying. Brenton Foley is starting this race from 3rd on the grid, ahead of Goofball Antics, who we normally see a little bit higher up in qualifying. 4th is not too bad considering for him. Roadhog, the creator of this track, has a great qualifying result, as you can imagine, starting from 5th in the Toyota Celica, next to Nether in the Porsche 935, but admittedly doesn't like this track very much. Will be trying his best to get some good points out of this event if he can. Pablo, the teammate to Bang, as we mentioned earlier, will be starting this race from 7th, ahead of Tyrrell. Rody in the trio of Ford Capris. Decimad starting well down the order in 10th position. It's going to be interesting to see how far he can get up, and if he can get up a little bit further at all with that heavy Porsche 935. Madbird, having cut the track in qualifying, will be starting this race from 11th on the grid, ahead of Xerus, who we expect to be floating around the top of this order, and who, Stairs, you expect to be making his way back up the grid in the race. He'll be starting from 12th position, having suffered a similar fate, and Rody, I cannot see. So it may... No, sorry, Rody will be starting from 9th position. Sorry, I neglected to mention him completely.
I think you did mention him, didn't you? You did go through him.
I'm
on screen anyway.
Not sure these days of my old age.
You're younger than me. It's always remarkable to me how the guys often don't actually run in track order, in the order that they've actually qualified. For example, Brenton Foley in 3rd place is running behind Goofball Antics in 4th place. It's like they forget who's supposed to be ahead of the other. I think the game should penalise them for that, frankly, but maybe it's me being petty. It just makes it a little bit confusing for us as the broadcaster trying to decipher what order they're supposed to be in. But thankfully, we do have the numbers next to their names.
Just looking for any old excuse to spice up the racing, are you, Stairs? Trying to throw out penalties for any conceivable reason. 24 hours of lemon style. And yeah, that might be pretty entertaining to see, actually. You get some very interesting penalties dished out in that series.
I like the idea of the race where you don't tell people who wins the race until the last lap. So essentially you run a race and then at the last lap you say, all right, 4th is the winner, and then they all scramble to try and finish 4th somehow. I'd like to try something like that.
I'm a big fan of the fact that they start the race by waving the green flag to a random car in the field, and the rest of the field has to figure out who started the race already.
Very good, very good. I like that idea very much indeed. As the cars now come around the Lorenzo bend, as it's now been dubbed, and about to take their grid spots. Lots of weaving. Really, at that speed, I think that does the fat end of nothing. But it looks good. That's the main thing.
That's certainly right. And I think a few of the guys may have just been getting a little bit crossed up trying to get back in their respective positions. Because as we touched on earlier, you can't really pass anyone on this grid. There's not a huge amount of space to maneuver around other cars to get in your correct position. So you've got to do it a little bit earlier on. They seem to be gridding up in the right order so far. Sam Smith is currently ahead by 2 inches in this race before they've even started moving because Resist isn't at the blocks completely yet.
Doesn't matter if you win by 2 inches or 2 miles. A win is a win.
That certainly is. But Sam Smith is on pole position for this race. The lights are on.
We're about to go racing. And it's a pretty good launch for Resist, but Sam Smith was pretty much equal behind them. The second row got a little bit better start, but Goofball Antics is clear of Brenton Foley as they go through into the first corner, and Sam Smith will lead Resist. Goofball Antics down in third, and side-by-side action going on behind them, but pretty clean so far. One of our best starts yet, but we still have to get through this Barbagallo-style section of the racetrack. Pablo off onto the curb, but he manages to keep it facing the right way. Madbird up 3 spots.
Oh, Sam Smith is well off through that corner, and he's dropped down to second position. Resist is picking up the slack, and Sam Smith is now down to fourth, having been passed by Goofball Antics and Brenton Foley. Terrible mistake there from Sam Smith. He does not want to do that again this race.
And Foley went a little bit deep there as well. So now Resist leads the race. We've also got Decimage in the background going off the racetrack, losing spots as well. So it was a pretty conservative start for a few of the guys, but Xeris, through a little bit of attrition, has picked up 4 spots off the start, so he's well on his way. Up behind Tyrrell currently. Resist has an 0.8 of a second advantage over Goofball Antics, and Sam Smith is set about trying to rectify the damage from that off earlier on, and is up on the back of Brenton Foley.
Xeris is already up to 7th position. I'll just watch him go around the outside of Tyrrell through that long sweeping left-hand bend. So he knows how to get the most out of this BMW 320. And I think if you're going to be making audacious moves like that, the 320 is the best car to do it in, because with such a low weight on that car, it's a much easier to control around those fast corners, of which there are plenty at this circuit. It is still Resist who leads, though, ahead of Goofball Antics and Brenton Foley, dipping his wheels in the dirt there in third, and he's about to get leapfrogged by Sam Smith, who's back up into the podium spots.
Yeah,
if they stay the way they are, that'll be my prediction, called out perfectly, I think.
A great job. But I still reckon my prediction is proving to be a possibility as well, as Xeris off screen, we're missing a lot of the overtakes here, has made his way past Nether by the looks of it, and I think Nether's had an off somewhere because he's dropped down to 10th. Probably catch a replay. Let's see what happened. Was it a little bit wide for Nether? Up on the curb, spun it off, and contact with the wall. Our first casualty with the wall for Nether, so he's back down there in 10th place. Very bad luck for him. That's gifted the position to Xeris, who's now coming up to... Oh, he's already overtaken Roadhog. Roadhog almost let him through. So Xeris is up to 5th already.
We had some more contact as well. I think Pablo has made an impact with the wall summer because he's already in the pit lane, missing quite a lot of bodywork. Not sure what's happened to him. Rody had a spin as well, dropping him back to what is now last place on the track. By 11th, having lost a bit of time there. And now we've got...
Roadhog's just gone off. Sorry, Roadhog went off the racetrack there and is coming under pressure now from Decimage and Madbird, who are coming up after Decimage had an off earlier on, but he's up 3 spots from where he started, as is Madbird. So they're back. They're on the back of Roadhog right now.
Yeah, it's quite a hairy race so far. So a lot of guys are going off in...
Oh, Roadhog goes off. He's gifted the 2 spots now. Decimage and Madbird both go through for 6th and 7th place.
What a shame for Roadhog. He was mentioning in the group voice chat earlier that he hasn't actually touched this track for quite some time. He made it
and Xeris,
3 or 4 years ago.
Xeris has made his way up into 4th. It's all happening, Matty. There's no time to take a breath.
It is all happening. Madbird's had a little bit of an excursion there as well. He still sits in 7th, 4 spots up from where he started, as does Decimage, up in 6th position at the moment. And Xeris is up to 4th, as we've got Sam Smith all over the back of Goofball Antics. This is a great race between these two. I've been watching Brenton Foley on the back of that car for the better part of a lap and a half, and he hasn't been able to do anything. Sorry, Sam Smith on the back of that car. So Goofball is really showing how defensively he can drive that BMW 320. Let's see if Sam Smith can do anything. He has a look up the inside on the run down into the Lorenzo corner. Oh, he's having a look. No, Goofball is going to keep his car there. And
Oh, he's locked it up, and Sam Smith gets it all crossed up on the exit, spun it around. It was basically there for the taking, but had a little half spin. His Porsche 935 Turbo's power is going to give him an opportunity into turn 1, though, unbelievably, even though Goofball Antics had a bit of a head start. And Sam Smith gets ahead. So this is the championship contenders, ladies and gentlemen. We've been denied this for a long time, but we're seeing them have a head-to-head battle.
This is all going to be music to the ears of Xeris, though, but Xeris has launched over that first chicane as he did in qualifying. He'll have got a track cut warning for that one, so he's going to have to keep on his toes for the rest of the race, although his pace is very good. 8 spots up from where he started as Brenton Foley gets the back end out behind him. So all these 5 guys at the front are really starting to, get to grips, trying to get as much pace out of these cars as possible around this track, really pushing 110% out of these vehicles. Resist especially is not pulling as much of a gap at the front as we've seen in the past races with the Pink Pig Porsches up there, but he is ahead by 2.3 seconds, and with the unpredictability of this race, that is a very nice margin to have up your sleeve, isn't it, Stairs?
Yeah, he would have been hoping that Goofball kept him behind for a few more laps, because this is unknown territory for Resist leading laps. It's one of those feelings where you think, great, I'm in the lead, but then you think, oh no, now what do I do? You've got nothing to chase. And sometimes that the psychological impact of that can have an effect, but he's doing a splendid job so far and showing a lot of confidence out there in the lead at the moment in that BMW M1. But Sam Smith is reducing the gap 10th by 10th. Goofball Antics has just dropped off a little bit.
Yeah, Sam Smith is one of the drivers we know in the field who performs much better with a carrot in front of him. One of the carrot type performers as we've referred to in the past, and Sam Smith really likes the chase.
He doesn't like that moniker though, I'll tell you that much. He did his best to try and get rid of that moniker with that result in Barbagallo where he absolutely dominated.
He certainly doesn't like that, but it's sometimes the truth is stranger than the ones we like to paint. So Resist is ahead by only 1.9 seconds now. He's lost a couple of tenths that last lap. He's making it up as he powers down the straight, but Sam Smith is not too far behind. And Resist posts the fastest lap, quickly bettered by Sam Smith by the 2 minute 5.4. So already that lap has been overtaken by Sam Smith in second position, and that's going to be shaping up to be a fantastic scrap for first place later on in the race.
That was a remarkable lap time. Sam Smith took 1.2 seconds out of Resist on that lap, so Resist was the fastest man on the track until Sam Smith bettered that time by over a second. So that's just how much quicker than anyone else on the racetrack Sam Smith is at the moment.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff, and it makes you wonder if he just quickly had a seat swap with the same person who was driving that car for the first 3 corners and spun him off the track. He must have, yeah, he just got caught out, I suppose, and he's really getting to grips with that Porsche 935 around here, and he's really muscling it all the way up towards the back of Resist now. And that's going to be a great scrap, as I mentioned earlier, because passing is a premium around here. And if you've got 2 cars that are pretty evenly matched, they're going to be battling for quite some time. Xeris now, I'm just having a look at him. He's
Sam's just locked up a bit. He's gone and lost a few tenths there. You were saying about Xeris. Goofball Antics has gone off the track and allowed Xeris through into 3rd place.
Yeah, so Goofball Antics was losing a little bit of time to Xeris, but he's now lost a lot more time. He's gone wide at one of the right-hand corners there, and he's let Xeris through. So it is Xeris up into the podium spots now. What a fantastic start from him. 9 positions up in the first 3 laps and a half. And that's really not something you can quantify too easy in terms of driver skill. But Xeris is really showing us his mettle and why he's one of the best drivers in ARW Stairs.
Yeah, I almost want to rejig my prediction now, because qualifying doesn't really matter now. It's only been 10 minutes since the race started, but he's already in contention possibly for victory tonight.
Yeah, exactly. So definitely keep your eyes peeled there, as Resist has a bit of a lockup. He's already catching up to the back of Pablo, who looks to have had a second off somewhere and lost a lot of time. So this is where lap traffic's going to start coming into play. Pablo makes it very easy for him. Great job by Pablo to get out of the way there on the run into turn 1. Xeris has posted the fastest lap with a 2 minute 5.4. He is absolutely flying in that car, but he's off at turn 1. No, he's rotated at the pit exit.
And
what a shame.
Blind corner. Where's Goofball Antics? He's way back behind Brenton Foley for some reason. Why is he that far back? Let's catch the replay. He's heading off at the exit of the Lorenzo corner. So both the BMW 320s spinning within 2 corners of one another.
What a shame. You wouldn't read about it if you tried. And now Brenton Foley is challenging for the podium positions as a result. He's currently in 4th. one spot down from where he started, looking to get back up into third. But Xeris has his lights ablaze, and he's trying to squeeze every last horsepower out of that BMW 320, and he wants everyone in front of him to know it. But there's not a huge amount of people in front of him as Brenton Foley goes right off of that chicane there. Xeris has a gap of, as I was saying, 13.5 seconds to the car in front of him. So he's got a lot of qualifying laps to do before he can catch up to the back of that leading group now. But Brenton Foley, this will be music to his ears, and Goofballs as well, because he's getting quite close to that Ford Capri as well. So we've got two battles starting to form now. The battle for first is a margin of 1.1 seconds, around about a second now, as Sam Smith gets up onto the back of Resist, and a battle for third place is close as well. No! Brenton Foley's had a big off, and he's relegated himself down to 5th position, pushing Goofball Antics back up into 4th. So it looks like a lot of the passing in a few of these battles is going to be done off the track, literally.
Well, that's what I said, isn't it? If you keep your nose clean, guys ahead will make mistakes, and you'll just get a clear way through, and that's what happened for Goofball Antics just there, with Foley allowing him back through up into 4th place. But Goofball Antics only about 2 or 3 seconds behind Xeris, which was roughly what the gap was prior to them both spinning a lap ago. That's what gave Resist and Xeris this 12-second advantage. Now Sam Smith is only 0.3 of a second behind race leader Resist, and close enough to make Resist dive to the inside to try and cover the line. And this is a battle, ladies and gentlemen. Resist wants to hang on to this lead. He wants to resist, if you will.
2-minute 5.359. Very nice pun there, by the way. I'm not going to let that go unnoticed. But it is a new fastest lap for Sam Smith by a margin of about 0.05 of a second over Xeris. So he's still pushing the limits of that car. He's not going to be making any more fast laps this time around with that traffic in front of him, if you can even call it traffic. It's some of the fastest traffic you'll ever see on any racetrack anywhere. But oh, he's having a look up the inside. The camera angle doesn't show us much. No, he's tucked back underneath Resist now through this this left-right chicane that's been catching quite a few people out, actually. Those curbs aren't too dangerous, although it is a steep curve there, so you have to be careful not to hit that curb with too much passion. Otherwise, you will get up on 2 wheels and lose some time. But as you can see, the gap between these two cars quantifiably is negligible, as they're all over the front and back of each other. You can just about squeeze a second car in the middle of them there. They'll be pretty tough to park between at the moment if they were stationary on track. Big lock up for Sam Smith.
He's managed to get it stopped, though. I thought he was going to sail right into the back of Resist for a few moments there, or if not that, go onto the grass, but he did a very good job of gathering that up. He might have a little bit of a flat spot for his troubles, and still quite a long time before we expect them in for their pit stop, but he's caught right back up to Resist.
Yeah, I'd say that lockup was a result of a very daring lunge that he was going to try to attempt that it hasn't worked out for him. So he's just going to be spending most of this lap sizing up really good opportunities as he loses a bit of time on the exit of that corner, actually. And that's going to cost him on the run down to the fast right-hand kink here before Lorenzo. So the gap is now at 0.7 of a second to in favour of Resist.
Yeah, he's not able to pull the trigger when he gets there, is he? He'll be loving this battle, though. You and I have had the pleasure of speaking with Sam Smith in person, and he'll just be grinning from ear to ear with this battle, no doubt.
Meanwhile, in terms of battles, I just want to cast your vision back to 6th position at the moment. It is now a 3-car battle between Madbird, Decimage, and Roadhog, so that could be something to keep your eyes on as well. Madbird's done quite well so far to make up a good bit of ground from his starting position of 11th, so he's looking to make up as much time as he can. His next car in his sights is Brenton Foley with a gap of just under 5 seconds. So I'm not sure how much time Madbird is gaining. I haven't had a chance to look at sectors. He's run a little bit wide, but Decimage has almost rotated his car behind, so that field is quite close as well, and that's music to Roadhog's ears, who's looking to make up some of those spots to be back up close to where he qualified. Meanwhile, back up the front, Sam Smith is all over the rear of Resist once again, trying to make that pass happen. Can't quite do it just yet. Resist is driving an incredibly defensive race, but he doesn't have to drive that defensively around a track like this that favours line astern racing and doesn't promote a huge amount of overtaking. So if Sam Smith wants to get this move done, he's going to have to plan it to perfection, Stairs.
One advantage that he does have with that BMW M1 is that it does have a fair few horses under the bonnet, so it does go pretty quick. Not maybe quite as quick as the Porsche 935 Turbo, but it's not as vulnerable as the BMW 320 in a straight line, so he is able to use that to his benefit. While they're battling, they're not losing too much time, about half a second or so per lap to Xeris, and that is sustainable. but not for too long. Just for the immediate future, Sam Smith isn't too worried about the threat from behind while he tries to get this pass done.
If the cars stay where they are, that threat might present itself in a lot more, in a much closer margin than we would expect, because I don't think Zerus is going to be spending as much time in the pit lane as these two guys in front. Of course, Zerus running a much lighter car in the BMW 320, so he's not going to need to spend too much time in the pits. He's not going to be putting a huge amount of fuel on board.
Whoa!
Because they nearly make contact. The car's in first and second at Lorenzo hairpin there. I'd say there's about 2 millimeters in that between Sam Smith and Resist. He's having a look on the inside now. He's got a lot of momentum, or so he seems to think. It's not enough, though. Resist still holds the lead into turn 1, but that would have been very disastrous if it panned out any differently, Stairs.
It's a good point you make about the shorter pit stop for the BMW 320 being a lighter car. That was what gave Zerus the advantage last week in Montreal when Berto seemingly had it won in the first sector. In the first stint of the race, he had something like a 30-second advantage, and a couple of mistakes, and then the shorter pit stop for Zerus put Berto under pressure, and in the end, Berto coughed up the lead and Zerus was able to take the win. Now Sam Smith's trying to go around the outside of Resist, nothing doing.
Starting to look very impatient, Sam Smith, but it's not really a characteristic we see of his driving. He's normally very cool, calm and collected, and able to keep the car on the straight and narrow throughout a whole race. But Resist is doing a stellar job of keeping him behind right now. We've got lap traffic coming up ahead in the form of Rody in the Ford Capri, currently sitting in 11th position. He gets out of the way and sticks to the inside, so great job from Rody. Great sense of judgment there to keep out of the way of these two and not hamper their battle at all. But Sam Smith is finding it incredibly difficult to get past the BMW M1 in front of him.
Top 4 in the 206s on the last lap round. They're in a class of their own. Resist, Sam Smith, Zerus and Goofball Antics. Everyone behind them in the 210s or slower. So there is a huge gulf in performance between the top 4 and the remaining drivers in this race.
Yeah, it really goes to show us. Sam Smith has a big lock up there, gets into the grass, and he's almost rotated. He's kept it together, but he's lost a lot of time. The gap is now approaching 3 seconds to the car in front. Doesn't let it get to that stage, but that's a lot of time lost for Sam Smith.
Yeah, let's catch a replay of that moment there for Sam Smith. He didn't panic. It would have been very easy with that lock up and subsequent off to then light the rears up as he got the rear wheels over the curb, and it could have been much worse. So he lives to fight another day. He's only 3 seconds adrift, and given the pace that he has shown, as he has a bit of a moment on the exit of Lorenzo hairpin there, to be able to reel that gap back in if the pace that he showed before the little moment there is there afterwards. So 3 seconds now. He still has a 10-second advantage over Zerus, who is lapping quite consistently on his own and is looking quite good for another podium finish tonight, with Goofball Antics just gradually dropping back 10th by 10th. But they are in a class of their own. As I said before, Brenton Foley 15 seconds behind, and he leads that battle for 5th place with Madbird, Roadhog behind. Desamage has had a moment somewhere, so he's dropped well off the back. He's about 12 seconds adrift of Roadhog, and then Tyrrell in behind him, and Rody 1 lap down. Now, we didn't see where it happened, but Nether has DNF'd somewhere along the lines. We saw him in the wall earlier on in the race, and he's just been passed by Pablo, who is the second man 1 lap down.
Yeah, it seems that Nether has decided he's had enough of this track, and Sam Smith is having a little bit of time, an excursion off into the grass there, as I mentioned that as well. So that's even more time lost for Sam Smith. He's starting to let this track get the better of him, which is not what you want to be doing as a driver, and that's going to be benefiting Resist twofold, because one, you've got Sam Smith falling off the back of you incrementally a little bit more each corner, but also he's got no pressure on him now. He's not having this pink pig Porsche filling up his rear view mirrors as he was in the previous lap. So now he's got clear space in front and behind him. It gives him a good clear state of mind that allows him to put in good consistent laps and not worry too much about anyone trying to get past him. So doesn't have to drive defensively, doesn't have to alter his lines too much, and he can pull away a sizable gap now if he has the skill to do it, which I think he does.
That's right. Well, Resist, I think, if he wasn't considered potential race winner before today, he certainly is in the reckoning for that now. He's proved that he can keep Sam Smith behind him for a number of laps. The biggest disadvantage of that M1 in previous rounds has been a long pit stop that it has to make, but of course the Porsche is in the same boat. Zerus is very much in a good position here, but if Resist can stay ahead through the pit stop phase, he is very much in contention for this victory, as Sam Smith has proved not proven to be able to get by just yet. How much longer could Resist handle the pressure? Every lap where he does keep Sam behind him is another lap where he will gain confidence.
Yeah, and another thing to note about the pit stops is there's more to them than meets the eye, because it's not just a matter of, you know, getting the car in without touching any walls. This is going to be tough on this track as well, and getting all the fuel in your car that you need as quickly as possible. But also, it's going to be a matter of getting those calculations right. We've seen a few instances earlier in the season where some of the drivers have got their calculations a little bit mixed up and have had to fuel save quite a bit. As we see Brenton Foley spinning at turn 1, causing a local yellow flag. He's rotated the car back around and he's pointing in the right direction. But he's lost 2 spots to Roadhog and Madbird. So Roadhog has been promoted up to 6th position, and Madbird is now up to 5th. So great running results so far from Madbird in the Nikon Cancol R-Tech Ford Capri. Goofball is still sitting in 4th at the moment, with sizable gaps to the cars in front of and behind him. And Xeris is about 9 seconds off the back of Sam Smith at the front. So it's all starting to thin out a little bit in the first 50% of this field, Stairs.
I think we're looking good here for a potential Xeris victory. He's within striking distance with that pit stop that we keep talking about. Much as Sam Smith and Resist probably will hate to hear it, but that BMW 320 is staying within range.
It certainly is, and just watching Sam Smith now, the gap is still about 4.3 seconds, so it's staying pretty consistent between Sam Smith and Resist at the moment. Shows they're both pretty equal on pace, and I'd say that gap is going to shrink back again once Sam Smith fully gets his confidence back, because he would have been a little bit shaken as a result of those excursions he had earlier on during that battle with Resist. So he's just understeered quite a bit from the final turn, mind you, and he's back down to 5.2 seconds as the gap. So he's lost quite a bit of time as a result of that relatively small looking mistake. So he'd be wanting to keep that to a minimum as well to preserve his tyres as he wants to preserve his lap times.
I think one weakness that Sam Smith does have is when he comes into the pits, he often overfuels his car. He spends a lot of time in the pits, sometimes fueling to get probably 2 times as much as further into the race than he needs to. And I think that's usually just because he hasn't done the research usually, and he lets his teammate Berto do it, and just for a bit of a buffer, he puts in too much, spends too much time in the pits, and then loses time that way. We've seen that cost him before, and sometimes that has been the difference between himself and his teammate. And with Berto not doing their strategies this week, it could be something that has an influence on the way this race pans out.
Yeah, the penalty for that is twofold. Not only do you spend an excessive amount of time in your pit box putting that fuel in, but it also makes your car just that little bit heavier, which increases your lap times, of course, because you've got that much more weight to lug around. He has another off. So he had a pretty close gap earlier. So I'd say Resist made a similar mistake of his own that we didn't catch. The gap was down to about 2 seconds and is now closer than it was before, despite that off-track excursion, as Sam Smith gets right up on 2 wheels and loses much more time through the left-hander there, and that's going to be very costly for him. The gap is now 7.4 seconds to the front. So that's big detriment to Sam Smith's attempts. The gap is now 8 seconds. So Resist is sailing on smooth seas right now. And Xeris is only 6.8 seconds off the back of Sam Smith. So if these mistakes keep happening, Xeris will be getting into this second place battle a lot sooner than he imagines he would.
Yeah, Sam Smith was pushing hard. He did the fastest first sector of the race on this lap, and he actually took 9/10 of a second out of Resist. Then he had those couple of offs that we just saw and threw it all away. So he's pushing hard, but Resist will be quite confident knowing that the pace that he's setting, he's causing Sam to make mistakes trying to catch up. And now Sam will start to worry about Xeris more than he will worrying about Resist.
I don't think it's over yet for that battle for first, though. I think Sam Smith has the potential to catch up to the back of that BMW M1 at some other stage in this race, because we just saw how much pace he can carry with that Porsche 935 and how quick he can go around this track relative to Resist. So, on paper, he can be a lot faster, but it's just a matter of consistently stringing clean laps together, which is incredibly crucial to making up that lost time, and it's something that Sam Smith is really struggling with right now. But in terms of the rest of the field, I'm just having a look through now, not really a huge amount of close
Sam
battles.
Smith, sorry, he's had a big off, going very, very wide off the racetrack. Somehow has kept ahead of Xeris, but he was end over end when I look back at the screen. Just going to try and catch a replay, and it was a big lockup, well off the track, and hit a big mound in the gravel trap. That might have even damaged his car.
Yeah, that's huge. So it just goes to show how big the topographical changes are around this track and what they can do to a car when you drive over the wrong part of them. And that's a massive blow for Sam Smith's win chances here. The gap to the front is now 11.2 seconds. Music to Xeris' ears, mind you. If he can get past, he's going to be able to charge down that gap at the front. But it's a matter of if he can get past and stay in front. Because two big two-wheel moments. And he's just...
Yeah, he's just thrown it away. There's something wrong with that car. Either he's hurt the tyres too much and it's just undrivable, or he's damaged it with that moment a few moments ago. But he's now down in third place, and looking like he may well even struggle to hold on to third place. Although, having said that, Goofball Antics appears to have dropped quite a bit of time in recent moments, and he's now 15 seconds adrift. So Xeris goes up into second place, and Resist will see that in his on his timing screen that it's now his brother that he's battling for the win, at least in the short term, and the gap is 12 seconds.
Well, I was about to say that if Xeris gets past Sam Smith, it's not going to be a long-lived battle because Sam Smith will be following the back of Xeris. He'll get that confidence back very rapidly with the car in front of him. But now the gap is already 1.3 seconds, although it's a little bit closer than it was half a lap ago. He's already able to claw back a ton of time, being able to look relatively closely at the back of that BMW 320 to make up that time. But some very costly mistakes there from Sam Smith. Not sure if he's carrying any damage though, so that's something that'll be handy to see. He didn't go into the pits that time around though, so I think his car's okay.
And this will also be music to the ears of Goofball Antics, who's trying to protect his championship lead. And just a weird little fact that I don't know if it will have any bearing on this race afterwards, because it still has to finish with them in the positions that they are now for this to really be relevant. But prior to last round, Goofball Antics was leading the championship on 97 points. And by the end of last round, Sam Smith moved from 86 to 97 points. And if it were to finish now, Goofball Antics has gone into... Are you with me? Are you following me? Goofball Antics went into this round on 113 points. And if it were to finish now, Sam Smith would be on 113 points. So he's following behind Goofball Antics, basically one round behind him in terms of the points that he was on. That was a very long bow to draw, but I got there in the end.
For all of those listening on at home, there will be a test on this at the end of the broadcast, so get your pen and paper ready and make sure you scribble down everything that Stairs just said, because it's going to be very important to remember as we see the cars continue to go around the track now. Very interesting to note, though, how much this championship battle is going to be varying if the results are as the way they are, and we really can't predict how this race is going to finish up at the moment. We can already tell that a few of these guys are probably going to finish very strongly based on their pace around this circuit. Those guys mostly being Resist, Xeris, and Sam Smith, if he can get his car and driving woes sorted out, as we see Decimage now pacing through the pit lane, taking what I believe is his first pit stop with 27 minutes to go. So we're just past the halfway point of this race, and I'd say we've got the first of our pitters now.
And coming out in that battle between Xeris and Sam Smith, but he allows Sam Smith to go through, so he doesn't affect it adversely for either of them. So I wonder if we'll now see a flurry of activity as people react to that pit stop. Last lap around for Resist, he lost a fair bit of time to Xeris, a 209 flat, whereas he has been in the 206s, so thick end of 2 or 3 seconds in that battle for first. Down to 8.9 now, so that is coming down. Is that Resist's tyres starting to go off, or did he encounter a bit of traffic on the lap?
Not too sure. Maybe a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. I haven't really had a chance to look at his sector time so far, so he might be running just a little bit slower than he normally does. His first sector this lap around was a 44.54, which is not particularly rapid at all, so I'd say his tyres are falling off by quite some margin. So he may need to come in next time around. The BMW N1 has historically in this series been one of the earliest stoppers in the races, so I'd say he'll be in pretty soon, as we've got two Ford Capris pacing through the lane now. Brenton Foley is up on the jacks getting a new set of tyres. as we see Roadie go off the track there, and Madbird has taken his pit stop as well. So, a few of the guys...
Capri's reacting there to Decimage coming in, and looks like they've retained that spot. Decimage behind Tyrrell, with Tyrrell, I believe, not having stopped yet. Very close battle, in fact, between those two Capris. As they come out of the pits, only a couple of seconds separating them. And Brenton Foley gets a drive-through penalty, so that's completely irrelevant now. So Brenton Foley falling foul of the pit lane speed limit.
Yeah, it's something that may have caught him out in terms of, I'm not sure how fast he was actually going to that pit lane.
Race leader is in. Sorry to cut across here, but just saw the gap to the lead coming down, and the reason is because Resist is in the pits.
As I guessed earlier, that BMW M1 is burning through those tyres rapidly. He should be able to go to the end of the race on this set of tyres and this tank of petrol, so it should only need to be a one-stopper for him, of course, unless he gets damage, heaven forbid. But yes, the pit lane speed limit is something you have to be wary of, because during practice sessions it's 100 kilometers an hour, but during the race proper it is 80, so you have to be very careful to stay around there. And of course, these cars, being from the 1970s and 1980s, have no speed limiters, so it's all down to you and how accurately you can keep your foot on that throttle pedal.
And it is a very, very long pit lane, as we mentioned earlier on. It's very, very easy to just have a bit of a flinch of your foot on the pedal, and that sends you over the speed limit. So Resist has managed to not speed, and that's his one and only pit stop done. He'll be very relieved that that's now done. He try and set about getting some quick laps in, try and get a bit of an undercut on the guy he was battling, which was Xeris. But Xeris, we know, can have a shorter pit stop, but in Montreal it didn't come to bear. He ended up having a longer stop than we expected him to have in Montreal, and that could have cost him the chance to... sorry, not in Montreal, it was Watkins Glen I'm thinking of. Could have cost him the chance to battle Resist for that final spot on the podium back then.
Yeah, so pit stops can really make or break a race in this DRM series, and it's something that you have to keep your toes and your wits about you always. You got to keep on your toes, and you got to make sure you get that pit stop nailed to perfection, so as not to lose any unnecessary time. Xeris is currently leading the race, having not taken his stop yet, but I imagine he'll be running for quite some time before he has to come into the pits. So he'll be leaving that as long as he can, and Sam Smith, given the stoppings of Decimage and Resist in similar cars, will be probably coming to the pits within the next few laps, so he'll be dropping back very soon. Goofball Antics had an off-track excursion just earlier. Wasn't too detrimental, but he did lose a few seconds, so he may need to come in for some fresh rubber soon. And Sam Smith has not stopped yet, so both those guys are out on track as we see the car of, I think it is Brenton Foley, taking his drive-through penalty, as Sam Smith posts the fastest lap, a 2:05.134. So Sam Smith is still flying along. There's no sign of wear yet in his tyres, so it might still be a little while before he has to make a pit stop.
Got his confidence back then. Maybe he didn't get any damage from that incident with the topographical elements in this racetrack, and Brenton Foley quite awkwardly for that battle for second and third, or first and second actually, now that Resist has come into the pit lane. Foley has come out in between them, but he's now allowed Sam Smith to go through, so that has certainly put Foley out of contention. He's now off the lead lap, which leaves Madbird as the final man on the lead lap, because Roadhog hasn't come in to make his pit stop yet. Madbird running a net fifth until Roadhog makes his pit stop, and then it will be an actual fifth.
So, yeah, keep in mind just where the whole field is going to be at the moment and how they're going to all shake up once they all finish their pit stops, as things will change quite dramatically, and we will see, yeah, some people getting leapfrogged by botched pit stops. We'll see Tyrrell rolling through the lane now, taking his stop for the race, and he'll be rejoining at some point. Not sure if there's going to be any traffic near where he's going to be coming back onto the track.
Most of the traffic is in the same sector at the moment, where the leaders are coming through to lap a few cars. First, second, 10th, 7th and 8th are all in the same sector.
Yeah, so quite a lot of lap traffic in that part of the circuit there. And the point I wanted to touch on earlier, I was struggling for words to say earlier, but I figured out what it was, is that when Xeris came on the exit of turn 1, he crossed right out into the pit lane exit and nearly collected Brenton Foley, as a matter of fact, as he finished his drive-through penalty. So I'm not sure that constitutes a track cut. Obviously not, because
Sam's
he's
in.
doing it. Sam Smith is in now in the Pink Pig Porsche. So Xeris is stretching his legs and getting the most out of that tank of petrol in that BMW 320. There's a 206.628 from Xeris, quite some way off his fastest lap by a gap of about 1 second and 2/10. So he's not going to be challenging those lap times anytime soon, and he may need to even pit in the next few laps. But Sam Smith is now still sitting in second position. The next car, Goofball Antics, is scheduled to pass him round about now. So he's not going to lose too many more stops because Resist has yet to round the final corner of its track yet. And it will be interesting to see how much time Sam Smith has made up. I don't think he's made up a huge amount on Resist, as a matter of fact, because Sam Smith is still stopped in his box as Resist flies past on the track. He's just pulling out now. Yeah, so it's a very long stop from Sam Smith. He's just leaving his box now, and that gap is already up to about 9 seconds, and that's going to extend as Sam Smith rolls along this long pit lane. Roadhog is the nearest car behind those, but he's quite some way around yet. He's still 5 corners or so off the back of the pit lane entry. So it's going to look like that Sam Smith is going to come back out and rejoin this race in 4th position, which should become 2nd again once Xeris and Goofball pit in their BMW 320s. Goofball, as a result of pit stops, now sitting in 2nd.
Oh, and he goes off. He goes straight off on the cold tyres. He's done that now twice on the first lap and on his first lap out of the pits on cold tyres. Made a mistake and lost an absolute bucket load of time. He was 20 seconds behind Resist after coming out of the pits. That gap has now grown to 27 seconds. And Resist, Sam Smith giving himself it all to do to be in contention for victory tonight.
Well, that's not going to be very good for his race chances, is it now, Stairs? He can't keep doing that. He's done it again at the chicane. He just doesn't realise that he's got no temperature in those tyres, and he needs to slow down and get those things warmed up before he can keep going on the laps that he was doing. I think he's just a little bit excited coming out of the pit lane, wanting to make the most of his fresh set of tyres and trying to get as much pace onto the track as possible. But he just can't do it until everything's up to temperature. So he's going to need a little bit longer to wait. We saw him driving a little bit impatiently earlier in the race, and he looks like that's still persisting. So that's not going to be paying dividends for his race results. He's currently 30 seconds behind Resist, so he's been losing an awful lot of time throughout this race, and Resist is positively cruising.
Yeah, Resist looking very, very good for his 2nd podium of Apex Rear Wing, and potentially in the hunt for his 1st victory as well, which would be a fantastic result for him, and it would be fantastic to see yet another different winner in this very competitive DRM championship that we are having right now. But Sam Smith, as far as the championship battle goes, the one, I guess, silver lining for him is that Goofball Antics isn't having his best race. But having said that, Goofball Antics will have that shorter pit stop with the BMW 320. The gap from Goofball Antics to Sam Smith prior to the pit stops, if I recall correctly, was about 20 seconds. So I think he will probably still be marginally ahead of Goof, but he needs to be taking away more points than, a 3rd and 4th place finish. The difference between that is only a handful, and he's got to find the thick end of a race win's worth of points to put himself back into contention for this championship.
I'm still trying to figure out what it is that's creating such a large gap between Resist and Sam Smith, who are effective 1st and 2nd place runners at the moment, because it's hard to say whether it's the Porsche 935's abilities around here. We can't really draw any comparisons to Birdo, unfortunately, as he's not here. Decimate has had a couple of offs, and Nether has retired from the race already. Or whether it's due to the fact that, whether it's because the 935 is just hard to handle around this track, or whether Resist is just getting to grips with that a lot more than Sam Smith is at the moment, because Resist is doing fantastic. Although he's not really challenging fastest laps, is he?
Well, let's see what he did on the last lap. 2:07.7, so it's a steady old pace. Xeris has been absolutely flying lately. He's been 2:05.7s. And then on that lap, he's done a 2:06.3, so he's about a second a lap faster. He's very much putting himself in contention to overcut Resist, with Resist having been the first to pit. We're waiting for these BMW 320s to make their pit stop. They told us in practice that they couldn't do it on no stops. So it's about when they pit rather than if, with no safety cars in this race. But they are making it a sweat on it. It's kind of like the 400 meters in the Olympics. It's not until they straighten out on the back straight that you actually know who's ahead.
They won't want to stop until their fuel tanks are absolutely crying out for a drink, because the less weight you have in those cars, the better. So They'll just do a quick splash and dash towards the end of the race, get some fresh tyres on for a quick sprint to the finish, although they won't want to let their tyres get too deteriorated around this circuit where tyre grip and wear is such a crucial aspect of this circuit here at Hollowham Raceway.
Just looking at the onboard from Goofball Antics, who has got his live stream going, and I'm watching it on the other screen. That first corner where you come up over the crest, and that's where we saw Sam Smith go off a few laps ago. It's basically blind, so you're sort of pointing the car as you go over the crest in the direction of a corner that you can't see yet. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why we saw so many people making mistakes there. Sam, a few laps ago, we saw Xeris do the same thing in qualifying. Very, very easy to do.
It's great fun, though, when you get it right, as I found out in practice. It's quite similar in that sense to corners such as the carousel at the Nürburgring Nordschleife and also the corkscrew at Laguna Seca, and that they're completely blind, and you have to get the thing lined up on the way in just on faith alone. You know where the track's going to go vaguely, so you have to get your car pointed in that same sort of direction. And also, I suppose, Skyline at Bathurst is very similar, and the Dipper, that part of the track as well. We just throwing the car in, getting a little bit of air under your wheels, and just trying to get the thing planted in the right direction as you come down. Makes for a real fantastic corner.
Well, Xeris has gone around and neglected to go into the pits for one more time, so won't be at least another. It will be at least another lap until we find out whether he will retain the lead of the race after the pit stop. So Goofball Antics is now coming up to the final corner. Let's see if he ducks into the pit lane. And he indeed has the fuel to go around one more time. So again, making us sweat for it. The gap from Xeris to Resist is 42 seconds. I reckon that might just be enough. Goofball Antics' lead over Resist, though, is 10 seconds, so that certainly won't be enough. We know that much. It is a very long pit lane, so the pit transit time is significant here. And Sam Smith, well, I reckon Sam Smith will be struggling to get ahead of Goofball Antics when Goof makes that pit stop, given how big that gap is.
Yeah, the delta time for pit stops is excessive at this track, given the length of the pit lane. And that can be evidenced by the fact that Brenton Foley is already a lap down in 7th position as a result of his drive-through penalty that he had to take early in the race. So it's not something you want to be doing at all. Keeping out of the pits as much as you can and spending as little time as possible in the lane when you're coming to do your stop. So it's not something that Sam Smith has planned to perfection. He was in that lane for quite some time, and it's something that we'll see is quite different between that car and the BMW 320s when they come in to get their final drops of fuel towards the end of this race. I don't imagine they'll be spending too much time out on the track, though. I just noticed Xeris' lap time dropped off about 2.5 tenths from last time. Could just because he's driving a little bit more cautiously now with a gap of 35 seconds to the car behind him. And a pretty good, I'd say once he gets back on through the pit lane, he won't be too far off the back of Sam Smith either.
He's still the fastest man on the racetrack, though. Second fastest is his brother, who's 0.4 of a second slower than he is. Xeris goes around for another lap, so even though those tyres are old, he's still very, very quick.
We'll have to see what this lap time turns out to be when he crosses the line. But yeah, if he's still the fastest man on track, that really says something. It's a 207.0, so he's lost quite some time there. And yeah, I'm not sure if he just... Oh, big slide there through turn 1. I'd say his tyres are starting to be on the way out.
And Goofball Antics last time around was a 207.9. So I don't know if he had traffic or a mistake on that lap too, but he's probably the closest benchmark in terms of car performance, as they're both running the BMW 320 and Goofball Antics with a bit of a lock-up into the Lorenzo corner. But what that means is that he's not coming into the pits again, so they make us wait. The gap between Xeris and Resist is 43 seconds as it stands. Will that be enough for Xeris?
Yeah, 2-minute 9.2 for Goofball there, so lost what I imagine is about 3 seconds off the back of Xeris there. So they're really starting to thin out in these front parts of the race here. The closest margin we have on track at the moment, I think, is between Roadhog and Madbird, which is a gap of about 2.1 seconds. So I'm not sure how much pace Madbird's been making up on the back of Roadhog, but that could be a pretty interesting battle in the next few laps.
Madbird was ahead of Roadhog before the pit stops, and I thought that Roadhog was ahead because he hadn't made his pit stop, but it seems to me as though he has made his pit stop, because I don't think the Celica can go this deep into the race without stopping. So that appears to be poor position without any more pit stops for either of those two drivers to the end of the race. So very, very interesting to see what happens there. Not a huge gap, and Madbird is lapping a few tenths of a second faster than Roadhog at the moment, so he might be able to close up towards the end of this race.
Yeah, those BMW 320s are the last of the pit stoppers, of course, so it goes without saying that every other car on this track who has been able to complete this race distance so far has made at least one pit stop. So, except, of course, those BMW 320s in first and second. Zerus is staying out for yet another lap, so he's going to come across the line to complete his 21st lap without a pit stop, which is a great innings so far. With just over 10 minutes to go in this race, that really shows. So it's going to be about 6 more laps, I think. So it's going to be 27 or 28 lap race by the time he comes around to finish it, or whoever is leading the race comes around to finish it, that is. But yeah, he's still out on the track. Goofball is not sure what he's doing at the moment. He's just going through that right-hand kink quite some way off the back of Zerus. The gap is now 40 seconds between those two. So Zerus really knows his way around this track a little bit better than Goofball does. And Goofball is still staying out. He's on the right-hand side of the pit wall as he comes down into the Lorenzo corner. So really, those BMWs have a lot of longevity around this track.
I don't know if the BMW M1, though, of Resist actually took tyres on that stop, because he's lapping slower than Zerus at the moment. So if there was a tyre advantage for Resist, it's not making itself apparent right now. Their lap times basically favouring Zerus at the moment. 206.3 for Zerus. Goofball Antics was a lot slower with a 208 flat and a 206.5 for Resist, who lost about 0.3 of a second to Zerus. Sam Smith was a bit faster than Resist on the previous occasion, but he's given up so much time to Resist that it doesn't look like he'll be on the podium tonight.
No, unfortunately not. So there goes one of my predictions out the window. So Sam Smith is currently sitting in 4th position and looks to stay there given the gap to the front. So, but Resist, yeah, he's going very slowly. I'm not sure if he did take tyres. I wasn't able to keep track of that, of course. But there is every chance that during his pit selection menu, as he was rolling into the lane, he just neglected to set a new set of tyres and just opted for a top-up of his petrol.
Well,
So
we say he's going slowly, but we mean in relative terms. He's still in the 206s, which is terrific time. It's just that relative to who he's battling, they're going that little bit faster.
I'd say he did take tyres in that case then, because if he didn't, they'd be well and truly disintegrated by now. So he may just be slowing down. He's not going to be matching the same pace he had earlier in the race when he had Sam Smith as a reference point there. He's not really pushing himself too much at the moment either. He's really calmed down and he's settled into a fantastic rhythm that he needs to get this race under wraps.
One person who is struggling, though, is Goofball Antics, because if he doesn't come into the pits soon, he'll actually get passed by Resist on track, because Goofball Antics is now about 6 seconds ahead of Resist. That was as much as 10 seconds not too long ago, so that is coming down quickly. Yeah,
it seems like those tyres on Goofball Antics, Goofball's BMW have really hit a cliff there. He's staying out again, though, so he must be pretty confident in how that car's handling, despite the fact he's lost 3 seconds in this last lap alone to Zerus. So maybe next time around he'll need to come in as the BMW 320s continue to motor around this circuit with 7.5 minutes left to go in this race. It almost makes you wonder if they are going to try for a no-stop race.
Well, they're certainly going to make us sweat for it. We did have a race, I think it was Sebring, where their pit stops were so short that we missed them. But we've been focusing on these two for a large portion of this race. I don't feel like we've missed their pit stops. And nonetheless, 7 minutes to go, and they've yet to come in, so they certainly like to wait until the death. It's going to be a very, very short pit stop indeed, because I can't imagine that they will bother taking tyres for 5 minutes splash and dash. They are just going to go in there, they'll throw some fuel at it, they'll barely touch the car, and then they'll be back on their way. And that gap is staying steady at about 43 seconds between Resist and Zerus.
You'll have to refresh my memory, Stairs. Do they allow the cars to take fuel and tyres at the same time, or is it one after the other in the pit stops?
You've got me. I can't remember personally. I think they do them concurrently, but I'm not 100% sure about that.
Well, someone will have to double check during the off time of the broadcast so we can get that right for you next time around, folks, as we come back for next week's race, which will be at Algarve in Portimao, which is a very modern circuit, not something these cars ever raced around in the past, and is full of a lot of those corners we were talking about earlier. Fast corners, Yeah, Zero stays out, crosses the line, does a 2 minute 6.9, so he's losing a little bit of time, not too much. But yeah, the Algarve circuit next time around has a lot of those corners where you're going over blind crests through fast kinks, losing a lot of front end grip. So that's going to be very interesting for some of these loose handling cars, Des.
I'm just trying to read the numbers on Goofball Antics' stream because I think he might be fuel saving, or might have been fuel saving, and that's why he's giving up a lot of time to resist. There's a good chance he'll be able to make it to the end, I think, based on the numbers I'm seeing. I think he's using about 3 litres per lap, and it's very difficult to read the numbers, but that's what I think it says, and he's got 12 litres left, which means that he will be able to do another 4 laps, and I think that 4 laps in 5 minutes, well, you do the math. We're going around at over 2 minutes per lap. I don't think he'll need all of that fuel. So, Xeris, I wonder if he's in the same boat, because they may well have pulled a master stroke and done the old no stop on us when we didn't think it was even possible.
Well, Xeris will have to keep an eye on him, because he might run out of fuel and start coughing towards the later stages of this race, as we see Rhodey around the same part of the track as Xeris is at the moment, off into the fence, causing a local yellow flag with no danger to passing maneuvers at all, because there's no real cars near him at the moment. He's got a gap of 41 seconds to Goofball behind him, but if he has to stop for an emergency splash and dash, that's going to cut chunks out of his time because of the amount of time spent traversing the pit lane. So he needs to keep an eye on his numbers, but he's really charging ahead, not seeming to pay too much consideration. And if Goofball is just going to narrowly scrape... Oh, Resistance rotated his car. Sorry to interrupt myself there, but he hasn't lost any spots so far. The gap is still 22 seconds to Sam Smith, but he's made a little bit of an error there, so he's starting to come a little bit unstuck.
Yeah, that's a big shame, because with Goofball Antics marginal on fuel, he was starting to put him on under a bit of pressure, and that was just a smallest little mistake on the curb, bouncing across it and spinning.
Xeris is in the pits.
Xeris is in the pits. Big moment in this race, because we think Goofball Antics might be able to go to the end. Can Goofball Antics get ahead of Xeris? This is a huge moment in this race, ladies and gentlemen. We thought Xeris might have been able to pull the master stroke, but he is in the pits. But with Resist having that spin, that's doubly costly now. He's on his way already. Goofball Antics is a long way down.
20-second margin, but that is going to be cut into quite significantly as they go through this pit lane. This is going to be neck and neck. Goofball Antics stays out as we anticipated with his numbers. He's going to go to the end of this race without stopping with 3.5 minutes left to go. It looks like Xeris is going to get the lead as he comes towards the end of the pit lane. Yes, he is. Xeris has got that pit stop done and dusted, but only by the skin of his teeth. And now, I don't know if he has any fresh tyres on that. It's going to be a matter of keeping Goofball at bay, because now the gap between those two is 3.5 seconds. What an interesting race. That pit stop came out of nowhere. I had a feeling that Xeris wasn't going to be able to finish that, as Decimage just rotates behind Goofball Antics there. But I had a feeling that Xeris wasn't going to be able to get all the way to the end, given how he was driving that car. But now he's got a little bit more fuel. He's got a bit more freedom to push a little bit harder, but I'm not sure how much fuel has gone into that car. Is he going to have to fuel save for the rest of this race just to survive?
But the big thing out of this is that even though Goofball Antics didn't take the lead of the race, if this new revelation comes to fruition for Goofball Antics and he manages to stay ahead of Resist by virtue of not having to make a pit stop, that is massive for him in the championship. It means he gains points instead of loses points. And Sam Smith is now a long way off the back of Resist in 4th place, so that is very, very hurtful to Sam Smith for his championship charge, but very, very beneficial for Goofball Antics.
Absolutely, and it just goes to show how smooth of a driver Goofball Antics is, and how well he's able to conserve his petrol and his tyres around a track like this, which is an absolute virtue in the BMW 320s, which more often than not are teetering on the edge at a lot of these races of being able to pit versus not. He's just had a little bit of an off-track excursion there, though. That's cut into his time a little bit. The gap to the front is now 4.8.
So, Xeris, with the splash and dash, he had the pace to make that strategy work, so he didn't need to fuel save. And he's looking very, very likely now to become our second back-to-back winner of this championship, our third multiple winner of the championship, joining Sam Smith and Berto. But Goofball Antics is the man who will go away with the lead of the championship with 1 victory and 6 podium finishes if it finishes where they are now.
Yeah, so Goofball Antics will have made up 2 spots from his qualifying effort, but Xeris will have made up 11, having started from the back of the grid for the second race in a row. And it just goes to show that qualifying is relatively inconsequential with these 55-minute races with a pit stop thrown in there for good measure, unless you're someone like Goofball, of course, and he can get around those 55 minutes without needing to stop. We've got 53 seconds left on the clock, so it will be a 28-lap race as Xeris will come around to cross the line and start the final lap in about a minute and a half's time.
Now, we didn't catch it because we were busy working out all of the strategy, but Madbird has made his way past Roadhog. That happened in the last few laps.
Sam Smith rotated at the last corner. Sorry to interrupt there, but he's lost a hell of a lot of time.
Catching a replay now as he came up. He was lapping Decimage on the approach to the Lorenzo corner and just lost it under brakes. Got too deep and spun out mid-corner. And Decimage very, very politely stopped to let him go, retake the racetrack. Doesn't really matter. He's got a big margin behind as the counter enters its last 10 seconds. We'll join to see Xeris is a long way from the start-finish line, so one more lap after this one.
Yeah, he's put in just enough petrol to be able to get a great margin on Goofball. He's already up to 8.1 seconds in front of him now in the space of about 2 laps. So that extra splash of fuel has really helped him there because Goofball still has to drive very conservatively to keep that car running by the time he comes around the start-finish line in a lap and a bit's time. So Xeris has really pulled a masterstroke there, getting that pit stop out of the way in the dying stages of this race. Resist, who I thought was going to dominate this one, has really not been able to stretch his legs that much. He's still sitting in third, so another podium result for him at this stage would be great. He is 4.8 seconds off the back of Goofball now. If Goofball has to slow up dramatically, Resist might even challenge for second on track in the last lap. Keep your eyes on that one.
Yeah, not too far away. That spin we saw a little
Goofball's in the pits! He's in the pits!
Oh my goodness! Wasn't expecting that. I thought he had enough. I thought he had...
Oh no!
I must have been reading the leaders instead of the laps. So there we go. Goofball Antics is going to give up second place as Resist goes through into second place. God, he got so close. 1 lap away from being able to do it on a no-stop. That is remarkably close. Now, Sam Smith has had a few spins lately, and that may well have cost him the chance to take third place from Goofball Antics, as Goofball Antics is already on the move and Sam Smith is a long, long way behind. So it's still good news for Goofball Antics Championship because he will take points away from Sam Smith and grow that lead, as Sam Smith is only just coming up to the last corner now. It'll be a gap similar to that between Xeris and Goofball Antics a few moments ago, but Goofball Antics will be a little bit further ahead than Xeris was. That's 8 seconds. And as long as he is able to keep it on the road for the next 5.6 kilometers as he goes off the road just a little bit, he will take home the final spot on the podium. But Xeris has got half a lap to go. Resist with his best result that we've seen him have, second place today. We'll be very, very happy with that. I believe that's the strongest performance we've seen from him. No luck involved there. That was pure pace from Resist's point of view. Just the one mistake we saw, but he was matching it with the big boys for most of today.
Absolutely. He did absolutely everything he could in that BMW M1, and it really shows. A second place finish in this race is going to be a fantastic result. It's going to be his highest race finish ever in ARW, of course, getting his first podium not too long ago at Watkins Glen with that third place finish. He's going to improve on that with a second, so going to be really good to see him on the podium there. Xeris is coming across the line very soon. He's just in the final corner now on his 27th and final lap. Sorry for getting my maths wrong earlier. It is indeed a 27-lap race. He's out of the Lorenzo bend now, charging down towards the final straight. Xeris, with a gap of 15.5 seconds, will win as he crosses the line now to win race number 7 of ARW Season 8 here at Hollowham Raceway. Great result from Xeris, able to pit at just the exact moment to get enough fuel in that car to stay ahead of Goofball, who unfortunately had to make a splash and dash.
Flashing the lights, his brother Resist comes across to finish second. It's a Sizer 1-2, and they'll be very, very happy with that. Fantastic result for the two brothers. And Goofball Antics, having made his pit stop, is still quite a few seconds away.
Yeah, so Goofball's got a margin of, he's about 10-9. I'm not sure what that margin is at the moment. It's a little bit skewed by the fact that Resist has already finished the race. But Goofball is coming through the final corner now where he had a couple of spins earlier on. He's on the final straight now. He's unfortunately had to pit to get enough fuel to finish this race, but he still gets a podium spot. He still gets a points lead over Sam Smith, who is now crossing the line with a gap of 4.1 seconds. So he got close, but just not close enough. Sam Smith finishes this race in 4th, and he'll be kicking himself because he could have done a lot better than that had he not made those mistakes earlier. He did qualify in pole position, so we know he had the pace around this track, but he just couldn't convert it, which is very unfortunate to see.
That's right. A lot of mistakes for Sam Smith, and he also got the fastest lap of the race, so just wasn't able to convert that into a podium or even a victory. He was very much in contention for that, but it just fell away from him.
I think we've got the next runners on track at the moment would be Madbird, I think is still running, as well as Roadhog, and Brenton Foley has finished his race already. So it is a battle for 5th position between those last 2 cars now. They're charging down towards the Lorenzo curve now. It's quite a big gap though, it's 1.7 seconds. So I'd say Madbird has this one in the bag as they go through the final corner now. Madbird will come across the line if they stay the way they are. He's quite slow at the exit. Actually, no, he's out of fuel! Unbelievable!
Oh no, or has he let him through?
He may have let him through. That may be something we'll have to touch base with them on after the race. But the end result of that,
here. It looked like a purposeful thing. I know that, he ran out of fuel a few races ago. I think it was Watkins Glen, and Roadhog didn't pass him in a very gentlemanly gesture. I wonder if Madbird's repaying the favor there by giving him that position back, feeling like Roadhog deserved it on his track. Strange moment there, but that's my read on it from what I have just witnessed. Very, very bizarre end to the race.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what's happened there, but the end result is that Roadhog has finished this race in 5th position, which is his equal best result so far this season. So great showing from Roadhog, as we expected on what is essentially his home track stats.
It very much is, and it's a good result from him. And in terms of the points, it's actually his best result, equal with the second round in Belle Isle when he also finished 5th. So well done to him for that.
Yeah, great result from Roadhog there. But we also have to pay congratulations to our podium sitters, Xeris who finished the race in 1st position, Resist in 2nd, and Goofball Antics in 3rd. Let's start with Xeris, the winner of this race. Great result from you. Was pit strategy a little bit touch and go at the start of the race? Did you have a clear idea of how you were going to structure your pit stops, if you were going to take one at all? Or was it just sort of see how the car is by the end of the race?
The goal I guess I have is start with full fuel and run as long as I can on a low tank before I pit. So that's why I pit so late in the race, and Heathy as well, is because the car's a lot lighter towards the end of the race, and it works like that. There was never a goal to no stop that either. It would have been like 5 or 6 litres out of it by the end. So yeah, that's how that shook out.
Well, we're having a look at Heathy's numbers there, Goofball's numbers, I should say, and we weren't too sure. We thought he was going to be able to finish the race on a no stop, but when he came in for that final splash, it really took us by surprise. So, it turned out to be the perfect stops at the perfect time for you, Xeris. How did the BMW 320 go around this track? Would you say that this one suits the car the best out of all the circuits we've seen so far?
It's certainly one of the better ones because there were a lot of very, very tight braking zones and long corners as well. So certainly did suit the 320 on those areas.
Absolutely. And now with that race victory and Berto's absence from this race, Xeris now move up into 3rd position in the championship standings. Only 4 points behind Sam Smith. So great result from you. Congratulations again. We now move on to 2nd place getter, Resist. Well done on your 2nd position. That's your best finish so far in ARW, and that was down to pure pace alone.
Yeah, super. Thanks a lot. Feels good.
Yeah, so we weren't really expecting that BMW M1 to be as strong around this track as something like the 320, but you have mentioned in the past that you're very comfortable with this car now. How did it feel around the circuit?
Yeah, pretty good actually. I've decided to fiddle a bit more with gearing and be a bit more aggressive, especially given it has smaller straights. So I think that helped me in sort of the slower stuff, especially. And again, I've put in a bit more practice for this track, and I think as well. Being relatively new to sim racing, having a track like this that no one has experience on, I feel like it evens out the playing field a little bit in terms of track knowledge and all that. So I'll attribute some of that to the finish as well.
And of course, I can't let you go without mentioning that fantastic battle you were having in the early stages with Sam Smith. What was it like having him sitting in your mirrors for that major part of the first few laps of this race? Did it put a lot of pressure on, or was it a real driving force to be able to push that car down the circuit?
Both, really. It's always scary having Sam in your mirrors. He's you look one way and he's there, and then you look at the road and then he's suddenly on the other side, and he's puts the pressure on real good. But I sort of used that to push me ahead of the rest of the pack. My hope was that we'd at least push each other a bit further and maybe get in front after the pit stops with Cirrus. I didn't quite manage that, and I had a spin at the end there as well.
Well, it didn't seem to have hampered you too much. You finished the race in second position. Once again, congratulations. We move now on to Goofball Antics, the third place finisher who's extended his championship lead now to 129 points with a gap of 19 points over Sam Smith. Was the plan to make that final pit stop at the end there? Because for a little while, judging by the numbers that I was getting from Stairs from your live stream, you may have been able to finish that on a no-stopper.
Definitely not able to no-stop that. I didn't have the boost down low enough, so I was always planning to stop. But once Xeris got ahead of me, and it's Xeris, so you're not going to catch him. I just thought, all right, let's just dial the boost back, see if I can use as little fuel as possible, and just see where I end up. See if I can no-stop it and see where I end up. But I didn't drop it down enough. So once I realized there was another lap to go, I had no choice but to stop.
Yeah, it was pretty hairy given the length of the pit lane as well. We weren't sure how long you're going to be spending in that stop. But the end result there was that you were being hounded by Sam Smith at the end there. I think the margin went down to about 4 seconds or so. Were you worried that he might have... Yeah, it got pretty close actually. So he was really charging ahead in those final stages. Were you at all aware of how close he was getting?
Last time I looked, he was about 6 seconds, and I knew that was enough that he wouldn't catch me on that last lap. But yeah, I wasn't worried at all.
Well, you've ended up in third place, and as I said earlier, you've extended your lead in the championship. You're still the only driver so far to register a podium finish in every single race so far, and that consistency is really paying off. Well done again, Goofball, and well done to the other podium sitters, Xeris and Resist, of course. Stairs, anything else you wanted to ask the drivers on the podium?
No, you've done a good job. You've covered it off. Pretty much everything that I wanted to know, you asked them and they answered. So well done to those guys for finishing on the podium. And it looks as though we have a triple header, basically a three-pronged run to the line for the championship, with Xeris very much announcing himself as a contender tonight, just 4 points behind Sam Smith. And Goofball Antics 19 points ahead. None of them can afford any more slip-ups in the remaining 3 rounds. Goofball Antics with the lead, but we all know anything could happen at the end of this championship. So we can't wait for it to kick off next week continue, I should say, next week in Algarve.
Yeah, Algarve is going to be an interesting one because, as I was saying earlier in the broadcast, it's got a lot of these similar sort of corners that Hollowham has, in that they're very fast, sharp kinks over the top of steep crests where you're going to be losing a lot of front end grip, and it's going to make it quite tough to follow guys in front of you. It is another one of those tracks with a lot of runoff area to the walls, but it's a great track nonetheless, and it's going to be really good to see how well these cars behave around the stairs. I can't wait.
Can't wait either. That's about all the time we have for tonight, so we'll see you at the same time next week for round 8 in Algarve, just our second European round of the championship after we opened in Brno 7 weeks ago. Until then, bye for now.